Yeah, I think that sometimes people should hear all the talk that goes on before calls sometimes.
Yeah.
So Debbie just left. And we do this thing twice a year called the Peck thing. And the Peck thing it started out as a giant flea market or a bunch of garage sales in a small town a little bit west of us. And then it grew to where all these garage sales, having a small town, started wanting to do it at the fairgrounds. So then it turned into this giant fairgrounds flea market over the decades, and it's pretty big. It's a big deal, but so we do that twice a year, and it's a real the week is a real hassle because normally Debbie would close the shop, so, and then of course the shop would be all packed up, and going to the flea market, and then she'd have to unpack it and put it all back out, and it's a real hassle for the week. But that's this week. That's this coming weekend. So what's today? Tuesday.
So you guys are getting ready for it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not. I mean, it's actually okay. I don't mind doing the grunt work because I don't get to do grunt work in what you and I do. I don't get to do grunt work. Other than disseminating information or misinformation. That's not really grunt work to me. I mean, I need to do something physical, so I get up out of my chair and
Yeah.
But anyway,
I get to get up and get out of my chair to sleep. So. And I haven't gotten prepared at all. I mean, it's I have to get everything ready today. I finally got motivated today. So, I woke up this morning finally motivated to get things moving. So,
well, I won't do anything. I won't do anything that doesn't make sense to me. I call it moving holes. I don't like, okay, move this over there for now because it's going to have to be moved again, to its final resting place. I don't like wasting time moving someplace here to stage it, only for some place to be moved in the future. I don't like moving holes. When the time comes, I want it to go to its final spot every time.
Yeah, I know. I agree completely, and it's not my life right now. And I've come to accept it. That this is the way it is, and it's just I guess what I'm not resisting right now is the family stuff. It's going to be there, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I just am going to stay as present as I can and deal with as it goes. So that's the way it is. And
well, on that note,
what are we doing this morning?
No, on that note, you brought in. I know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to tell you yet. But one thing, the biggest part about waking up to reality at this level, which to me is no different than the last book of the Bible, Revelation, is the revealing of truth. And when truth is revealed, as long as we can accept truth, we will respond accordingly. But if we've been misled at a really high level for decades, centuries, eons about ideas or narratives, or stories that are nothing more than mythology, but we believe them to the level where we make them come true. We make these beliefs come true because we want them to be true. So everywhere we look, we see this, we see the bleeding eyes of some statue. Well, we all know that that's not a possibility, but we want it to be true. So the rusty water coming out of the statue becomes blood or something along those lines. I'm done with that world. I'm done with the supernatural completely. I understand the nature at a different level. I mean, if I make a handshake agreement and look into your eyes and we both understand what it is we're doing, we both know what it is we're getting for that agreement, I'm good in that world. But in a world where the presumption is we're agreeing on things, we're agreeing to disagree, I don't go there. I'm not going to agree to disagree, because then that rift or that separation exists where disagreement, I mean, first of all, let's just make this very easy. You don't disagree on truth because you don't have an option. Let me say that again. You don't get to disagree with truth because it doesn't give you an option. Something is true in spite of what you want, in spite of what you believe, in spite of what you agree on. You don't get to agree with gravity because you don't get to disagree with gravity.
Mm-hmm.
The truth doesn't give you the option of agreement. You just have to accept it. And that's a different world. That's the world where I want to exist in, where we both know what we're doing. We both know the truth of the matter. We both know what we're getting into. And we make an agreement that we both know the outcome. But in a world where presumptions are made that you agree to disagree and all that nonsense, that's a world of non-truth. And I'm fed up with that. And of course, in the Bible, it does say revelation, the revealing. When the truth is revealed, that world, that narrative disappears. That narrative, that world ends. Not reality. Reality doesn't end. But the false narrative, or the narrative, or the story that's being told, his story that goes away forever.
Yep. I agree. Yep.
But what I'm getting at is that you said something about family, and this is the most important thing, is when you're waking up to this level of consciousness, you have to let it go. You have to let the other people go.
Yep.
Look how long it takes to get to this level. I'm not saying it takes a long time. I mean, if somebody's willing to look at something honestly and say, yep, that's obvious. Fertilization, last breath, I'm all present and accounted for. It's that simple. Nothing's held in trust, nothing held in abeyance. My life has been one since the beginning. There are no sides to truth, and my life is one singular path. In spite of all of these fictitious characters that are born to some fictitious calendar, my life is singular, and I am the government upon that life, that one singular life. And when you come to those terms, everyone around you becomes a child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They will act like a child. They will act out against what they don't want to happen. They don't want to be responsible. They want, the parents patria, mama church, and papa state. They want to be treated like infants because that's the safe place. That's the warm place. That's the place where insurance and guarantees exist. But that's not nature, because remember, acts of God are not insurable. Acts of God are not insurable. So again, if nature, acts of God, are not insurable, then you ask yourself, what is being insured? Again, this is all for grown-ups. This is a grown-up conversation where if you're insuring something, it's because it's not of nature. It's not an act of God. So when they insure, when there's life insurance on a character born, a Gregorian calendar character, when there's insurance available for a character, that means that it's not an act of God. And if it's not an act of God, it's artificial. And so your agreement is with the artificial realm at that point, not reality. So when we start to take responsibility for our actions and understand that nature is not insurable, and we are products of nature, not products of some fictitious, once-upon-a-time Gregorian calendar civil law character, when we wake up to that and we become liable for all of our actions, and not hide behind the cloak of some ridiculous character or cloak of some ridiculous ideal. You know what I mean? When we wake up to that fact and we become grown-ups and deal with things honestly, that's going to be an entirely different world. And it's not for most people that exist today who want to be treated as a child. But that's when I was thinking about my family. I love my family, but it's better for me to not be there. It's better for me not to be around people that it hurts me to see people struggling. And I'm not saying they're struggling in any way financially or whatever. I'm just saying struggling to impress, or struggling to keep up, or struggling because they are told it's important, you know, how you look in the eyes of these others, when in reality that's a life of misery. And I struggle with that, knowing that this is our one go around on the planet, and we're struggling to do what? Appease or please others. You know, rather than live our life and become who we're supposed to be, we're just going along, you know, to get along. Let's just agree to disagree. What a world is that?
I know.
What a world is that? By the way, I'm going to go ahead and identify. I'm going to identify as a genius today. So that's what I'm going to identify with the genius. What's that?
Okay. Go for it.
I've decided to identify with the genius today. So that's what I am.
Wait a minute.
Okay, well, let me look. Let me just see what genius. Let me see what the definition of genius is, because that's what I'm going to identify with today. I already know what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the year 1871. So I'm going to say that up front. So you hold me to it. But genius. Could you identify as a genius today, please, Kurt?
Yeah,
genius. Let's see what Webster says. Genius. The meaning of genius. Plural for genie. Let me see how it's pronounced. Let me see. Genie. Genii. All right, so the plural of genii, an attendant spirit. An attendant spirit of a person or place. Well, that's me. Am I not the spirit behind this body?
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm a genius. 1B, plural, genii, a person who influences another for good or bad. A person who influences another for good or bad. Well,
You've done that.
What's that?
I said you've influenced other people somewhat.
But what about doesn't a birth certificate influence everyone?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, think about that. That's an undue influence upon everybody. The influence of infancy. So look what it says here. A genii is a person who influences another. A person who influences another for good or bad. Another. That's the third party, third person, tertium quid placenta, fetal maternal placenta, that has a birth certificate. That's a genius. That's a genii. That's a genie. That's a genie.
Mm-hmm.
A genius is also, number 2, says a strong leaning or inclination, a penchant. A penchant. Look at that. Number 3A says a peculiar, distinctive, or identifying character or spirit. I always like the way they do that, because the word breath, or to breathe, is to inspire or to be filled with spirit. Breath and spirit are one and the same. So as long as I'm breathing, I'm evidencing the spirit, or I am personally spiritual. I'm a spiritual man just by breathing. But look at it, also says, 3A says, a peculiar, distinctive, or identifying character or spirit. So a peculiar, distinctive, identifying spirit or a peculiar, distinctive, identifying character. Of course, the birth certificated person is a character within a narrative, within a Gregorian calendar, civil law narrative. A Gregorian calendar, civil law narrative. So again, that's a genius. But I'm identifying with the spirit side.
Mm-hmm.
Look at this. A genius is associations and traditions of a place. The associations and traditions of a place is genius. Here's what's really weird about that. What's the root word of genius?
Gen,
as in, I mean, we can look it up, but all you have to do is look at the word gen as in general or generational or, gens, G-E-N-S, Genesis. It's origin, or think about it. Once you know this, you go, oh, genius, associations or traditions of a place, someplace, the origin. If everybody comes from this place,
mm-hmm.
Everybody comes from a zygote, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody comes from a zygote. And again, the associations or traditions of a place.
Mm-hmm.
Personification or embodiment, especially of a quality or condition. Is infancy a condition?
Yes.
Yes, you can suffer infancy.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, by claiming an infant that never ever moves beyond, year one, every 365 days you celebrate infancy. That would be a condition.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, genius number 4 says spirit or Jinni, G or Jinni. The genius that the way we normally or traditionally think of it is a single, strongly marked capacity or aptitude. So when most people hear the word genius, they're thinking, wow, he's really smart.
Mm-hmm.
They really know what they're talking about. That's genius. Well, remember, genius is nothing more than being filled with the breath of God or the Spirit. That's a genius.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, your body would be the container or the bottle. So realistically, you can look at your body and your breath as a genie in the bottle.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty interesting to look at things that way because your body's nothing more than the container that holds or keeps the spirit until the breath is gone. So your body is that container.
Yep.
Genius 5b says extraordinary intellectual power, especially as manifested in creative activity. Again, that's a traditional idea of genius. Michelangelo, genius. Well, absolutely. But he also was just breathing, which made him a genius.
Yeah. And a genie in a bottle.
A genie in a bottle. How about genius adjective? Showing or suggesting great cleverness, skill, or originality. How much more original is the zygote than anything else? I mean, the 46 chromosome zygote, which is a product of mom's 23 chromosome ovum and dad's 23 chromosome sperm, never before has it ever been, and never after will it ever be. How much more original can your zygote be? You know what I mean?
Yep.
And each and every one of us has that originality, that original zygote, that origin, that
mm-hmm.
I call it the moment where Darwin meets God, where creation begins its evolutionary due process. It begins right at the moment of creation. And that, to me, I mean, look what it says there. Originality. Well, that's genius. Again, to be original is to be genius.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to make it clear that people, when they finally get it, when they finally wake up to it, your genius begins at fertilization. It begins there. Someone else's genius begins with the birthday.
Yes.
Well, your story, I call it my story. My story begins at fertilization, whereas his story, or the historical record, or the record begins at the birthday. Think about that. So all of us living and breathing are off the record. We are outside of the record, because the record is for characters. It's a narrative. The record is a historical narrative. And, of course, anything written down can be changed. But the truth can never be changed. Reality can never be changed. Something really did happen or it really did not happen. What the record reflects is the voice of what they say, the voice of the victors. So whoever's winning the narrative, or is able to present the narrative, it's whatever they say it is. But that's not necessarily the truth. In fact, it's never the truth. Right. It's just what somebody has written down to be true. So his story and my story are mutually exclusive, you know. His story and my story. My story is in the present. His story is for third persons. His story is not my story. And I can't claim it. By the way, tell me the biggest reason I can't claim any of history.
Because it's not true.
Because I've never been there.
Yeah. Because it's a story.
I've never been there, though. I have my own story. So no, I have my own story. I'm the author of my life. The author, I write the story. I make up it as I go. So it's not the word story that's detrimental, because we all have our own. But the fact that I've never been there, I can't claim any moment in his story, because it's already been claimed by that particular author, or that narrative belongs to somebody else. I can't encroach or infringe upon that story. If they happen to put me into their story, they would have had to have done that with my permission. Mm-hmm. Which is what me adopting their birth certificated character, by me adopting their character, I have entered their story, or his story. What if I don't? What if I choose not to adopt their character and actually live my own life? Well, that's a problem, because now the rules that are within that story don't apply. Mm-hmm. I'm foreign. I'm alien to that story, and they can't just write me in and say, he's a bad guy, he's a good guy, he's you know what I mean? He's a charity case. They can't just write me into his story and say, enjoy. That's kind of what this whole I wanted this whole call to be about. Ultimately, is I all I could think of when I woke up this morning was the year 1871. 1871, to me, established the not that it hasn't always existed, but it really gave the civil law of Roman civil law, or City of London civil law, or whatever, the toehold it needed. Maybe not even the toehold. It gave it a place. It gave it a place to work. The fictitious realm, to me, they had to have a place to begin that public that public story, the public narrative. And I don't think
so
there
was a... Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go.
Well, I just typed in 1871, and so the things that it's showing me to look at is the Act of 1781, the Chicago Fire of 1871, the 1871 Corporation of America, the 1871 Constitutional Change, 1871 Indian Head Penny, and the 1871 Census. That's just what it brought up just by typing in 1871 and nothing else.
All right.
So
now I have to.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to where you were, but I have three things that once people understand these three things in 1871, everything about the Gregorian calendar and civil law system. Again, the most critical of all, 1796 was Cruden versus Neal, and I'm going to start with that because that's the whole thing. They're saying it right there that as long as this, then this. It's very obvious that Cruden versus Neal establishes the rule book. So hang on. We're going IDB in the basement. 6 feet under.
6 feet under he goes. 6 feet under. Once again he goes. 6 feet under.
You obviously haven't had enough coffee this morning.
No, I'm only on my first cup. It's true.
Okay. All right. Well, I ran out of coffee, so it's there I am. Okay. So these three things, and over the years we've talked about all of them, but if you look at them collectively, so where am I here? 1871. So this call, I'm just going to call it 1871 because that was the year. Yeah, I'm going to go to where you were, so I'm going to click in 1871. Oh, just Google 1871.
Well, it could be different because mine might be.
Are you DuckDuckGo?
It's my
Are you DuckDuckGo?
It's my algorithm. Huh?
Are you DuckDuckGo?
I think I go to Yahoo or something. I don't know. I don't quite get how it works, but
I found here's one called 1871 historical events in 1871, and the website's called On This Day.
Oh, okay, yeah, I've seen that one before. I can go there.
I'm just gonna highlights, birthdays, deaths, weddings, events, highlights. Let me see if I go to highlights too. Major events. March. Okay. Oh, look at that.
Focus.
Event.
All right, on this day.
Begin service. Okay, so I'm going to I'm going to look at this. There's so much. In 1871, January, Paris surrenders to Prussians. Paris surrenders to Prussia, to Prussians.
Oh, that's interesting. You know, Prussian is where we got our present school system is from Prussia.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe people should look into Prussia.
Prussia is very interesting. It is. It's.
What was the fable about the headless horseman?
Isn't that Ichabod Crane? No.
Okay, I'm going to go to Headless Horseman because I'm pretty sure that was a Prussian story. Okay, Headless Horseman Wikipedia. I'm just going to go there because this is interesting to me. The Headless Horseman is an archetype of mythical figure that has appeared in folklore around Europe since the Middle Ages. And of course, it's the legend of Sleepy Hollow is the biggie. But it says the figures are traditionally depicted as riders upon horseback who are missing their heads. That's interesting to me because, to me, the old statement, fuck you and the horse you rode in on. The horse you rode in on, the horse would have been the uterine wall, the maternal part of the placenta. Of course, the body is the left behind vessel, which is your fetal biology. So the placenta evidences the headless body and the horse. And of course, your spirit, your government, your own self-government would be the head or the mind. So the headless horseman is the placenta separated, the fetal-maternal placenta, the rider and the horse itself, the rider being the infant biology, the horse being the maternal biology. That rider, the headless rider, is the placenta. And of course, that placenta doesn't have a government. It doesn't have a government because it was cut off from the government, which is the baby. So the baby's mind, the baby's consciousness has been separated from that headless horseman. What's interesting is Ichabod, the Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, all of this stuff, Irish folklore, Scottish folklore, Welsh folklore, they all have German folklore.
Well, the German one says Rhineland, and I asked if Rhineland was a province of Prussia, and it says that it was.
Well, when you look at
the Prussia.
Right. So I'm just saying that I have a sneaking suspicion that this headless horseman, this Prussia, so Prussia does what? Paris surrenders to Prussians. I'm going to click on that and see what it says here.
So you're at historical events in 1871. I have on this day. I'm on that day.
January 28th. Paris surrenders to Prussians. I'm going to open that link. I'm just going to.
Got it.
18. Okay. Yep. So I'm at Wikipedia, and it's called The Siege of Paris, 1870 to 1871. The Siege, S-I-E-G-E, of Paris, 1870-1871. The Siege of Paris took place from 19 September 1870. Oh, that's interesting. The birthday of Curtis Richard Kallenbach was 19 September 1960. To January 1871, and ended in the capture of the city by forces of the various states of the North German Confederation led by the Kingdom of Prussia. It says the siege was the culmination of the Franco-Prussian War, which saw the Second French Empire attempt to reassert its dominance over continental Europe by declaring war on the North German Confederation. So Prussia captured Paris.
Yeah, Paris was trying to take over, but it didn't succeed, yeah.
But, I mean, so, and then it goes on to say,
so that was the Napoleonic Wars, wasn't it?
That's what they would probably, be called back in the 1870s, or it's actually just 1870s to 1871. It's just interesting to me because of so much of the German or the German ideas are what we experience today.
Well,
and again, go ahead.
Well, the other thing that happened in that time was that they were in the part of the reason that Prussia eventually lost during that time was because they were doing the whole gay thing, the whole kind of woke thing that's going on now was happening in Prussia right about this time, too. They were bringing forth a lot of that belief system back then.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I see everything at this point because of the clamping and cutting of the cord. I see the remains, the fetal-maternal afterbirth remains, the umbilical cord and the extraembryonic fetal-maternal placenta. I see that separated now from the baby completely. So when I look at the baby, I see the indigenous savage or the indigenous heathen or the ethnic person left behind. So the baby is the ethnic heathen, the non-Christian. The baby. He's the savage that requires the church to save him. They call it salvation by doing what? By changing that savage or by converting that indigenous savage to Christianity. So there's a conversion. The baby requires conversion because he's just an indigenous savage or heathen on the land. The cut material, the umbilical cord, and the extraembryonic material that evidences your origin is the relic of Christianity. It's the holy ground. Mm-hmm. So they take that cut material and they call it the child of God. That's the birth certificated Christian. So we have to adopt Christianity. Us savages, us heathens, us pagans on the land. We need to adopt Christianity in order to have access to our property through Christian trust ideas or the idea of communism or Roman Catholic communal property for everyone. But that's what's really weird too is when I look up the word heathen. I mean, I'm starting to see this more and more in the news. But if I look up what would it be? Ethnic. ETHNIC, ethnic, and I look up the concept of ethnicity. If I go to ethnic at Webster's, and this will all fit into my conversation of 1871 anyways, ethnic is weird because you go down to number two, ethnic, it says of or relating to the Gentiles or to nations not converted to Christianity. Pagan. Mm-hmm. So ethnic is pagan, non-Christian. So anybody that's referred to as ethnic is a pagan or non-Christian. So I went to pagan. Mm-hmm. And of course, we all know that Rome itself was pagan. Number two at pagan says a person who is not religious or whose religion is not Judaism, Islam, or especially Christianity. And then it says heathen. So pagan and heathen are now the same. To be, says history, a follower of a polytheistic religion, as in ancient Rome or Greece. So now we're talking about the polytheistic Rome or Greece, which had multiple gods. Of course, literary pagan says one who has little or no religion and who delights in sensual pleasures and material goods. A non-religious, hedonistic person. What's really weird about sensual pleasures and material goods is substance.
Yeah.
Think about your body. Your biology is sensual. It's of the senses. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to go to all these words, but it says one who has little or no religion and who delights in sensual pleasure. So for me to actually enjoy having a body, a physical biological substance, they're making it seem like that would be pagan, according to definition.
Mhm. Well, and just to have the goods, to have your body. It's
just
not
to
only
have your
sensual
body.
pleasure, but you get to have your body if you're hedonist.
Let me do one more here. Let's see if I can find. I'm going to go to etymology and type in pagan. Etymology online, and I'm just going to go to pagan, P-A-G-A-N. Look at this. Pagan, circa 1400. It says person of non-Christian or non-Jewish faith, a villager, rustic, civilian. Look at that. Civilian is pagan. Civil is pagan.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes me, really think about the birth certificated Gregorian calendar, civil calendar character. It makes me really look at that and turn around even my own ideas if they must be. So let me get into this a little deeper. It says non-combatant.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? So to be pagan is to be non-combatant.
Is that peaceable?
It sure, but look at this. It says adjective meaning of the country, of a village, from pagus, P-A-G-U-S, country people, province, rural. Look at that, rural district. A district, a rural district. Originally, district limited by markers. Look at this. Thus, related to pangere, P-A-N-gere, to fix, to fasten. Think about that. If I have a birth certificate evidencing where that piece of me fell, and it's in Winnebago County, it's in the city of Rockford, or it's in the state of Illinois, that piece of me, where it fell, where it's located, I'm going to use the word situated. So I can say situation, situated, situs, S-I-T-U-S, the situs, its location. If that piece of me falls to the ground, Linda, and it becomes the marker or the locator of where I fell, where the angel fell, or where the man has fallen, the fallen man, the fallen angel is the cut piece. Because the man falls there and the angel falls there. It's a marker for both. The end of one and the beginning of another. The end of the angelic and the beginning of the heathen. But it says to fix. That's a fixed position. That's a fixed point. That's a stake in the ground. Think about it. It's a locator. It's a marker. It stays where it is. It's fixed. It's a fixed position, right? Is not September 19th, 1960 at 3:50 a.m. a fixture or a place in time or space or a locator? Is that not fixed in time and space? Sure it is.
Yeah, and it's also to fasten. If I accept the birthday, it's fastened to me. It's stuck to me.
And to fasten is to bond. If something is fastened to me, if you glued, something to me, you're fastening it to me. So to bond something to me, to attach something to me, is to fasten. What are they doing? What are they fastening? What are these markers? What are these district markers? But that's pagan. Think about that. Pagan, then, they're making it of the land. Pagan is fastened to the ground. It's fastened to the earth. It's fastened to what? The nature. It goes on to say the religious sense often was said in 19th century to derive from the conservative rural adherence to the old gods after Christianization of Roman towns and cities. So the people that believed in nature, the old gods, the tree god and the ground god and the wind god and all these other gods, that's nature, that's rural.
Mm-hmm.
And it says the old adherence to the old gods after Christianization. So you have these people these country people, these good country people, that are still looking at nature and the laws of nature, and nature's God. I guess they're considered, pagus or country people, provincial or province, rural district. I know that's they're limited by markers. And what's the marker for, the pagan today? Probably the birth certificate, evidencing what? The fall. Mm-hmm. It evidences the fall. It evidences both what? The left behind material, the end of that time, the end of the time in the womb. That's a terminal point. But it marks the beginning of the pagan on the land.
Yeah.
Or maybe vice versa. Think about it. If I'm speaking about the pagan, and this is the complete opposite of what I've been saying, Linda, so I need you to hear this.
Okay.
What if the placenta, remember that is evidencing your original material. The earliest version of your biology is the fetal biology that is left behind, attached to mom, attached to the maternal accretion, the uterine wall accretion. The placenta evidences the earliest version of you. And where you landed in Mother Earth or upon Mother Earth or embedded in Mother Earth. So here you are, the first 7 days of existence floating in the waters of Mother, completely not fixed, not bound, not attached to anything. And then about 7 days later, God supposedly rests, Genesis 2:2 King James. God rests on the seventh day. What does that mean? It means that you come to rest in the uterine wall. Now you've landed into the horse that's going to carry you. You've landed into the mother ship or the mother vessel or Mother Earth herself that's going to get you from nowhere, prehistoric, to now here, the historical record.
So that
and Mom does
Pangare.
That would be Pangare. You're fixed, you're fastened into Mother, the carrier, the mother ship. And then what? 9 months later, 280 days later, you do what? You eject from the ship, the vessel, your own capsule, your own fetal capsule, you eject from there, still attached to the cord, still attached to the ship through the umbilical cord. Now you come out of the mothership, the mom, you come out of mom. And what do? They clamp and cut your cord, the very thing that attached you to the ship. But they left your ship, your capsule behind, your biology, the ark that you have, your agreement with God has been left behind now. And now you're on your own, and you're a pagan. On the land. In the country. You've landed into a country. And now what? You're disconnected from. You're disconnected
from your origin, from God.
Completely, from that. But here's what I'm trying to get at: the infant that is fixed, the infant that is still attached to Mother, is evidenced by the feto-maternal placenta. Your biology, that capsule, is still attached to the uterine wall, and it's evidenced by that 92 chromosome biology, that tertium quid. That's a fixed position. So now look at it. Is the pagan evidenced by the decedent estate? So when you claim the birthday, are you claiming the pagan position? Or is the spirit-filled man, the baby, the one that still has the breath of God in it in the present moment, is that Jesus coming back to save the pagan on the record? You see what I'm getting at? Which is which? But here's why I have the answer. The answer is pretty easy when you do it this way. When you recognize it's one story from fertilization to last breath, not 2. When you realize it's from the single-cell zygote to this moment, it's evolutionary due process. The fact that they clamp and cut anything off is meaningless because you're still here in the present moment. So you're always here, in spite of the story they're telling, in spite of it, you're still here in the present.
Yeah. Well, it's like, for me, the feel is when I know the truth and I sit in the truth that I'm whole from fertilization to last breath, this last breath in this moment, it's like I can feel whole. I can feel a straight line. As soon as you start going in, well, is the pagan fixed material? Is it the, back and forth? It starts to get wobbly and confusing. And it has so many, well, it depends on if you look at it this way or you look at it this way or you look up or down. So truth is simple. Truth is a straight, simple energy. And all of the other can be confounding. It can be confusing because there's so many, well, I can look at it this way, I can look at it that way, I can do all these different things with it. And that then creates great controversy, you can have discussion, you can have laws, you can have all kinds of things around all of that confusion, where if I just stay with, I know who I am, I know where my origin is, I know where I started, I know the whole thing, it's like such a relief, such a straight energetic connection that isn't there when you go off into all these words. I'm sitting here moving my hands around in a circle, like this big ball I'm trying to get a hold of.
This is a really fun way to look at it. So the moment of creation, the very moment, fertilization, the actual moment where dad's sperm fertilizes mom's ovum, resulting in a singular 46 chromosome celestial body called zygote. Mm-hmm. That celestial body's floating in space. The story, everything that you are in that 46 chromosome. Everything you'll ever be is in there. And it's the present moment of its existence. It just happens to be in the womb. It just happens to be unattached, floating on in the waters of mother. Now, it attaches to the uterine wall. That's called conception. That attachment, that implantation is called conception. That what's interesting about implantation at that point is that's the moment you're fixed or you're fastened to the carrier, the mothership, the mother vessel, mom, or her uterine wall. You're fastened, and the point of the point of where you're fastened is your own biology interfacing with mom's biology. And, of course, mom develops this very specific interface biology, which is the accretion. And that interface biology becomes the maternal part of the placenta. So when that afterbirth comes out after baby, the afterbirth evidences the fixed position of the developing infant, the developing embryo, the developing fetus. It evidences that fixture, that residency, the time you were resident inside mother, the resident, the res-id entity. Res, subject matter of a trust or will. The id, which is the infant part, according to Freud, who was probably a Prussian. And, of course, the entity, the res-id entity, is evidenced by the fetal-maternal fixture called placenta. That's the fixture. That's the fix. The fix is in. The fix is in, and it's called infancy. Now, this infant, also known as a simpleton, also known as the pagan.
Mm-hmm.
The pagan is the simple. The pagan is the beginning, the one that's still fixed to Mother Earth. The pagan is when you see all the shows of the savages on these islands, that don't have running water or bathrooms or any of this stuff. That's that version of you, the one that is not, has not been participating in consciousness. Think about it. I mean, going out of your tent and finding some berries to eat, that doesn't take much thought. It just takes a little trial and error until you find out what doesn't kill you. But to build skyscrapers and cities that have sewer systems and all that stuff, that's a conscious being. Somebody that is thinking about what it is they want, and they create that world. The natural world goes out there, and we got to be careful with this, because in nature, I mean, nature provides everything that we require, but what if we want more? What if we don't want to live in caves? What if we want to live in penthouses in big cities? See, that's what people don't get. When I'm talking about nature, remember that for a man, nature includes this native, this pagan, which is his biology. It includes the pagan. But for a mature man, or somebody that comes to terms with his consciousness and the fact that he controls or creates or is the author of his own life, he gets to decide what he's going to do. And that consciousness is part of man as well. The problem is, the certificate evidences a split between the pagan biology, or the pagan, and the consciousness. And they're getting us to split our governance based upon that split. So now we have to choose between church or state when we're confronted with the question: do you want to go back to infancy and the welfare state of mother and child, or do you want to be, fully responsible for your existence and not have, the protection of the communism that the church provides, the communistic John Doe, we're all one protection of that collective infancy. So when I look at this, I'm thinking, okay, my biology is the pagan, which I'm going to call the dog on the leash, and of course the leash is my consciousness, my self-governance. As long as I maintain both the knowledge of the self-governance aspect with my dog, keeping my dog on the leash, my native dog, my pagan, on the leash, everything's okay. But here's the easiest way to look at this. I'm looking at it as, in the womb, is you're still 100% under the care of, I'm going to use the laws of nature and God, because there isn't any outside anything in the womb. Now, don't get me wrong. Mom could be smoking and drinking and partying and staying up late and doing all the wrong things, and of course her actions will be detrimental to the outcome of the being that she's carrying. Absolutely, positively, there's no doubt about it. But if nature was totally in play and mom was eating according to nature and everything else, this baby's going to come out as planned, as nature planned. Now, here's why this is important. So baby in the womb realistically is not just baby. Baby is all of the biology from the zygote. In other words, like the oak tree and the acorn, the zygote and the embryo, fetus, baby are all one. The zygote and the baby are one and the same. John 10:30 says, "I and my Father are one." Well, the Father's the zygote, and the offspring of the zygote is ultimately baby. So me and the zygote are one in the same estate, one in the same kingdom. I'm all one biology. Now, what's really weird is when I come out, when I surface, when I crown. When I'm crowning right there at the gate or the port of entry to the world beyond the womb, when I'm there, I'm right there at the gate. I'm at Heaven's Gate, at Stargate, whatever word you want to use for the vagina at this point. When I'm there, what do? I come out naked, and they cut off my clothing.
Yes.
They cut off the very thing that used to clothe me in the womb. I was covered by my own membranes. You might call it the amnion. Of course, the amnion is known as the Lamb or Lamb of God. So the amnion, which used to surround me, my own clothing was cut off of me. My own coverage, my cover was cut off of me. My own cloak. I use the word cloak because I'm thinking when they clamp and cut the cord, what do? They put that cloak, they put that suit, they put that armor of God, they put that vestment, they hang it up in like a cloakroom. Like a cloakroom, like when you go to the show and you come in out of, the out of doors and you go to the cloakroom and you pay the girl at the cloakroom to hang up your coats.
Mm-hmm.
So you're coming out of the womb. You don't know any of this is going on, but they clamp and cut off your godly clothing, the clothing that covered you in the womb, the closest thing you are to God, the clothes that actually evidence your godly origin. And they do what? They take those clothes from you, those vestments from you, and they hang them up. I'm talking figuratively now. They take that biology, and they fix it. They fix that biology. They fix that cloak. They fix that clothing, that vestment, that heavenly garment. They fix it in time and space. And somebody has the cloakroom. I'm going to call it the gratuitous Bailey, has a cloakroom where your garment, your vestment is hanging. And you're supposed to be able to call on that vestment, call on that garment. You're supposed to be able to put that clothing on when you're in trouble, when you need to evidence your godly origin in order to access your godly inheritance. You're supposed to be able to wear that clothing to evidence that you're a man of God or you're filled with the Spirit. 1 Corinthians 2:15, the spiritual man is to be judged by no man. But you can only do that if you're spiritual from the beginning, which is fertilization, you have clothing, you have a suit coat, a sport coat, you have something at the port of entry that you're supposed to put on when you get in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Unimpeded.
And so I believe that the material, the biology they cut off of you is that toga, is that garment, that godly garment. And I believe that what they're doing is they're saying, listen, when you get in trouble and you show up at that crossing, the gap between that, which is evidenced by the interstate, by the cut. When they clamp and cut the cord, what do? They create an interstate space between earth, the pagan, and heaven, the consciousness. And the only way you get to wear the clothing of heaven is when you have the knowledge of your godly origin and of the clothing that has been removed from you. That's where the idea of the court comes in. What is the court? The person and suit of the sovereign, mm-hmm. wherever he may sojourn with his regal retinue. So when you find yourself in a civil action, in a civil case, in a civil society, you better have the civil clothing to put on so you can be civil with these people and not be at war. And again, that's the clothing or the garment or the vestment that was cut off of you. When you get to their courtroom, you're supposed to be able to don those clothing. Now the emperor is no longer naked. Right now, the emperor has no clothes. Mm-hmm. And all the other people out there, they can't see it either. But the moment you wake up and you go, wait a minute, my clothing was cut off of me at the port of entry. Those clothes evidence my godly origin. The cloak. You get to put on your godly cloak and disappear from the fiction. You're no longer a party to whatever is happening. When they say you have to appear in this court, they want you to take off the cloak. Mm-hmm. When in fact, that's the moment you need to do what? You need to recognize your godly origin, and that's the person and suit of the sovereign, wherever he may sojourn with his regal retinue. And, of course, the regal retinue means what? Uterine. It also means what? Reunite.
Reunite.
So you need to reunite with that material, with that godly garment, with that. Maybe it evidences your first impression or your face, the face of God itself. Maybe the birth certificate is the shroud of Turin for each and every one of us. Mm-hmm. Maybe it evidences our first impression. Maybe it evidences that face plant, that impression. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's evidencing our godly origin, and that's all that's left is this of the first estate is the impression of the nobility of the second estate. You know what I mean? Maybe our godly estate, the first estate, is evidenced by the impression we make with in the placenta, as the fetal maternal placenta. Maybe that second estate, which evidences nobility, well, what's the nobility? That's the regal retinue. Me, as the sovereign, sojourning with the regal retinue, which is the uterine wall. Now I put on those clothes, and what? I have equity. I have nature's equity. Remember, equity is what? Justice according to natural law. And natural law begins at fertilization. So the only way I can actually have justice is by putting on that garment, by knowing the garment exists, by knowing, but how do I put it on? I put it on by having knowledge.
Yep.
And not leaving it behind, not leaving the garment behind. Well, Kurt, how do we not leave the garment behind? All present and accounted for. Oh, and accounted for. There's my garment. That and accounted for, to me, is evidence of equity. And it's the equity that's all we have. In the Christian society, in the Christian economy, in that ecumenical world, the only way the bill gets paid is by evidencing that deposition or deposit. And that deposit, with the knowledge of fertilization and last breath, it evidences equity. Now, the equity is at the Fifth Amendment. They call, that's the life and limb. That limb that was cut off of you, that was sacrificed or placed on deposit as the deposition, that's what gives the rise to double jeopardy. If that limb has already been sacrificed, you can never be charged for that character again, ever. So when that character, if there's a bill for that character, that double jeopardy sacrifice says that you can never, ever be charged with that character again. But what else is it? That's Jesus on the cross. That's the death of that's the fixed position. That cross is the fix. That's the stake in the ground. It's evidencing where you meet back up with Jesus. Yeah. Or Christianity. We'll call it Christianity. Now you're whole. For that moment, you're whole. And when you're whole, there is no credit and there is no debt. It's zero.
Yep.
And that zero is nature.
Go down to scroll down on pagan and go to the PAG.
PAG?
Mhm. It's an asterisk.
Okay. And it's a hyperlink. You want me to go to the hyperlink?
No, I just want you to read what's here. It says it's a Proto-European root meaning to fasten, which we've just discussed. But if you go and look at all the forms that it's used at, so I'm not going to say all the words, but the adjective is concentrated. The noun, one of the nouns is agreement. A prepositions with the leave of. There's words specific, pacify, pagan, sheet of paper, limit, boundary, restriction, shovel-shaped instrument, date. And then in the next paragraph it says, it is the hypothetical source of / evidence for its existence is provided by, in Sanskrit, pasa, cord, rope, pajara, solid, firm. And it goes on from there. But all those words that you were just talking about are right here from the word PEG. And there's Pacific, pacify, peace, pagan, cord, rope, sheet of paper.
So maybe when I add a Pacific transcription to our talks, the fact that Pacific, what's really interesting is this. I honestly believe that Christianity is nothing more than keeping your dog on a leash. That's all it is. And the dog is your biology. That's the pagan or the animal. And you're just supposed to be conscious or basically govern that animal. If you allow that animal to get off the leash, which I believe the birth certificate, when you don't know fertilization of last breath, all present and accounted for, then that dog is off the leash. That becomes known as a statute at large. At large is the dog off the leash. It's the dog running down. It's the fox running down the beach in Pearson versus Post. You know what I mean? It's the animal that is available for capture because you don't have it under control.
Yeah.
And Pearson versus Post.
Yeah, it's being self-responsible, really.
But it's really weird, too, is PAG, P-A-G, if you keep reading that, it says, and to fix, to fasten, Pagina, column, Pagus, district. Pagus, district. I'm going to do this. By the way, I'm going to go to, oh, bless you. All right, so there are three incredible, hang on, there are three really huge events for me of 1871. And again, anybody looking at the historical events on a global scale are going to find a lot of very interesting things happening in the world at that moment that correlate, or you can see where somebody's trying to pull all these strings together at one moment in time. Now, with the internet, I mean, they can make up stories all day, every day about things that are not really happening. They can talk about wars that really don't exist, or maybe they do, or maybe they only exist on paper. The internet's easy to bamboozle a lot of people at one moment because we're too stupid to recognize reality. But what I'm getting at is that in 1871, you know, they didn't even have the telephone yet.
No.
So the only thing that could spread news or would be
telegraph
newspaper.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is not a lot of people had access to things happening on a global scale. So these countries and these places were able to pull all these, off at the same day. You had the Chicago Fire, 1871. You have all this stuff happening to burn up history, to burn up the story, the narrative at the time, just to get rid of the evidence. You know, when they want to get rid of evidence, they just burn it all up. They start over. They did it in 1666, with the London fire. They did it, and of course, Chicago is the home of the Bar Association. So what do? They have a Chicago fire. They burn everything up and start over in 1871. But here's what's really weird.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The telegraph was just starting to be used. 1844, it was when it was first sent. 1866, it was across the Atlantic Ocean from the United States to Europe. So that was, and you could say 5 things in a telegraph. It wasn't something that was, and most people didn't use it at all. So I'm just saying your point is well taken. That's all.
Well, 1871. Remember that the outcome of what most people speak of as the Civil War. I'm doing this. I'm going to Haslam versus Lockwood, 1871. I'm going to Phantom Limb, 1871, and District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871. And then I'm going to Columbia definition, Okay, so here we go. 1871. Again, everything that happened from the Civil War, the term civil. I'm going to start with the Gregorian calendar because everything is based upon a Gregorian calendar. The entire narrative is based on a Gregorian calendar.
Going to Wiki?
I'm going to Wiki.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing, let's see. And then before I even go to Gregorian calendar, I'm going to the word Genesis.
No.
At Webster's, because I want people to know the difference between reality, because they're gonna have to start learning the difference. So and then I'm going to go to Genesis 1, KJV. All right. Let's go to Genesis 1:1 first in King James Version.
Okay.
I want you to think about the time in the womb at fertilization. The moment of creation is fertilization. The very moment of creation. By the way, the moment of creation when dad's sperm fertilizes mom's ovum. That's the beginning. That's divinity. That single-cell zygote evidences divinity, two vines coming together into one. That divinity evidences the archives, the genetic archives of your father's entire lineage and your mother's entire lineage. It evidences it. It has genetic information that goes all the way back through both of those bloodlines, those vines. Divinity. Then for the next 7 days or so, that divinity, that heavenly body, that celestial body, is floating in space, unattached. It's not fixed to anything. And then it lands. It actually embeds. You made your bed, now lay in it. It embeds into the uterine wall. It's called implantation. Implantation is also known as conception. So the moment of implantation, conception, by the way, is also known as pregnancy. Mom is known as pregnant the moment of implantation, but she's not pregnant up to that point. She's not even considered legally pregnant for the first 7 or so days of creation. So all that time where you haven't planted into the uterine wall or landed on Mother Earth or landed on Earth, so to speak, you've been floating in space in the waters.
Mm-hmm.
That's what is important, is to understand that mom isn't even considered pregnant yet. But you exist. So you exist, your godly estate, your kingdom exists as a single-cell zygote before mom is even considered pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
You exist.
Yep.
You exist before pregnancy. That's a hard thing for people to understand, because the idea of abortions and things like that are they're using the word pregnant.
Yeah.
In order for an abortion to occur, mom has to be pregnant. And pregnancy, what? Pregnancy begins at fertilization, at conception, implantation.
Yeah, implantation. Right.
Implantation. That's considered pregnancy. Never confuse that with fertilization. I apologize.
Yeah.
So the whole idea is that, can you abort something? Can you abort before pregnancy and still have an abortion?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm saying that if I exist before pregnancy,
mm-hmm.
then where does abortion come into play on this?
Mm-hmm.
Can they wash me out before I implant and call it not abortion?
Probably.
If I disappear if I go missing before implantation, because remember, Linda, the evidence of the placenta, the fetal maternal placenta, does it have me in there, or is that ship, is that vessel, is that ark missing its ship captain?
When it implants?
Is it when it comes out as afterbirth? Am I in there?
No, not after. At the afterbirth, no.
So the vessel, the boat, the ship, the ark that's missing me is empty.
Mm-hmm.
So when they clamp and cut the cord, I'm missing from that ship.
Mm-hmm.
And the island that ship is on. The placenta is a ship with an island.
Yeah.
Another word for island is insular. That's why there's an insular possession of the United States. The insular possession of the United States is the fetal-maternal placenta. And that's going to come into play because when you look up the definition of Columbia, the definition of Columbia is United States.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm missing, if that fetal-maternal island, that insular possession of the United States, is missing its captain, who's the government of the boat? Who's the government of a ship?
It's an unknown.
The captain.
If it's not cut off, right?
Is the captain the government of a ship?
Yes, the captain is.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah.
So what happens when the captain's missing?
There's no one to govern the ship.
There's no one to govern the ship. What happens if the captain is missing, but the second in command is still available?
Then the ship can sail.
All I'm saying is that what if number two, what if the secondary character, the second title, the secondary position, what if the second in command, second in charge, when the first in charge disappears, number two comes into play. Number two becomes the ship captain.
Right. Mm-hmm.
What if that's the middle name?
Yeah.
What if Kurt or Curtis is the captain and Richard is the next in command, but Curtis disappears?
Yeah.
Well, whoever created the title Curtis Richard Kallenbach then, whoever created that character has the ability to take control of the ship. Now, when somebody takes control of a ship that they don't have any rights to control, what is that called?
Mutiny.
Mutiny, usually done by pirates.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, mutiny is your boat getting taken over or having a new government, a different government. So if the boat you came in on has a different government, it's because of mutiny. It's because somebody took over your boat. Or it's because you left your boat on an island somewhere and forgot about it. And now somebody's going to come across that and say, hey, look what I found. And they're going to make a claim upon it or salvage that boat or whatever, but it's only because you have forgotten about it. Now, here's the thing. Again, going back to Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Well, how about this, Linda? Are acts of God insurable?
Nope.
No. So if fertilization is an act of God, the product of fertilization is the zygote, and the zygote's offspring is the baby, then the entire godly estate from zygote to baby, John 10:30, I and my Father are one, the entire estate that was created at fertilization is an uninsurable situation. It's all uninsurable.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have insurance on something, if you say, well, I have this insured, it's outside or beyond nature because acts of God are not insurable. So is a living, breathing man, the life of a man, insurable?
No.
No. So if there's life insurance, or if you think you have this insurance, then you're already admitting to the fictitious realm. You're already participating because you want somebody else or a collective to guarantee something that nature can't do. There are no guarantees in nature. So as long as you defy nature, as long as you keep choosing something contrary to nature, or the nature of man itself, which includes consciousness, by the way, as long as you continually defy nature, the laws of nature, then you will be subject to man's laws.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Cruden versus Neal, 1796 says what? In nature, every man is independent of all laws except those prescribed by nature. So the idea is that Cruden versus Neal is so simple. It says, listen, if you choose to go down the path that is contrary to nature, then man's laws will apply to you. But if you choose to align yourself with the laws of nature, then you're not subject to any of man's laws. It's either or, Linda. Cruden versus Neal lays it out. It's either or.
Mm-hmm.
If you choose against nature, you're subject to man's laws. If you align yourself with nature, you're outside or beyond man's laws. It's that simple.
The important word there is choose, and it says it in Cruden versus Neal. He is not bound by any institutions formed by his fellow man without his consent. So the big word that you're saying there is choose. And isn't that what is it in the Bible? Choose ye this day. I don't know.
And think about that. But Cruden versus Neal is also saying that you don't have a choice. The reason it says you don't have a choice is because it says every man is independent of all laws except those prescribed by nature. Do you get to choose in nature? No. So from the zygote, the 46 chromosomes, your kingdom, you don't get to choose that you're going to turn out to be a cat. You don't get to choose that you're going to turn out to be a boy or a girl. It's already in that genetic information what it is that's going to be the product of that zygote. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a boy. It's going to be a girl. It's never going to be a cat. It's never going to be a fish. It's always going to be what it's always going to be, and you don't get to choose.
No, you don't get to choose under God's laws, but you can choose not to be part of man's laws. Right? Did I lose you?
No, I'm trying to say it in a different way because you don't get to choose. That's what I'm trying to get past. I'm trying to get past that it's a choice. It's not a choice. You don't get to choose at all. In Cruden versus Neal, it says, every man is independent of all laws. Every man, there, in nature, every man is independent of all laws, except those prescribed by nature.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to choose at all. Even the word consent is misleading.
Got it.
Everybody is focused on the idea of consent when consent is meaningless in nature. I don't get to consent to the thunderstorm coming. I don't get to consent to the tornado that's going to rip my house apart. I don't get to consent to the lightning bolt that burns down my barn. I don't get to consent to any of those things. Nature is beyond consent. What they're doing is they're saying, listen, if you do go down the path contrary to nature, you're going to subject yourself to man's laws. If you go contrary to nature, you're going to be subjected to man's laws. Is a birthday contrary to nature?
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you make a choice, if you choose Christianity over the heathen, the indigenous person on the land, if you're choosing one or the other, you lose the other.
Yes.
If I choose Christianity, I lose nature. If I choose nature, I lose Christianity. They want me to make a choice because heads, they win, tails, I lose.
But I don't if I know I'm whole from fertilization.
But you're not making a choice.
Mm-mm. No, I'm just telling the truth.
You're just telling the truth, and that's my whole thing. If you always just tell the truth, then their narrative, again, going back to Genesis real quick, I'm going to go to Genesis, the definition first, because I think it makes more sense. Genesis, lowercase g, loop-tail g, Genesis, lowercase loop-tail g, Genesis. The origin or coming into being of something. That's tangible. That's reality.
Yeah.
Little g, Genesis is reality. The origin or coming into being of something. That's reality. But what is big G, Genesis? What does it say there?
The mainly narrative first book of canonical Jewish and Christian scripture.
So look what it says here, the mainly narrative. All you have to do is go to the word narrative.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just typing narrative at Webster's in, and we'll see what it says, narrative. Something that is narrated, a story, an account. A narrative is a way of presenting or understanding a situation. A situation. I just spoke of the word situation, as in the situs or the location of something. It says a way of presenting or understanding a situation or series of events that reflects and promotes a particular point of view or set of values. So Christianity, the idea of Jesus and Mary, the idea of the feto-maternal placenta as the measure that evidences what? That evidences that the person in suit of the sovereign away from the uterine wall, wherever he may sojourn with his regal retinue. In other words, the regal retinue is the birth certificated garment or vestment that evidences your stop, your residency, your residence in the uterine wall, which evidences the second estate. That's the estate of the noble. So the first estate is prior to implantation. That's the so-called dominion or domain of the ecclesia. So the ecclesia is saying, listen, all the time before implantation, that's our dominion. So in order for you to control fertilization to pre-implantation, or fertilization to implantation, which is all known as pre-implantation, remember the United States recognizes pre-implantation as being the correct version. The United States, if you go to Zygo right now and look it up, it says the United States, the National Institutes of Health of the United States says that pre-implantation is correct. What is pre-implantation evidence?
It evidenced the origin, the zygote, before the origin, my origin.
Before implantation.
Mm-hmm. That I exist.
It evidences the first 7 days. It evidences before you mix it up with mom.
Right. Yep.
It's evidencing the time before you plant into the uterine wall.
Mm-hmm.
And the United States is saying that is correct. Why is that correct?
Because it's true.
Because it's just you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's just me.
It evidences your kingdom. It evidences your sovereignty. It evidences your origin. Is anybody else party to that?
Nope.
And before that, where were you?
Not here.
I don't know. I'm just asking because before creation, before the biology, before the substance, before the little g, lowercase g, loop-tail g, Genesis, before the beginning of something of substance, where were you? My answer is I don't know, Linda, where I was.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a biology. I didn't have a substance to inhabit. I didn't have a substance to embody. I didn't have a place to land. I didn't have anything until the moment of creation, which is fertilization. But in the first 7 days, the United States recognizes the time before plantation into the uterine wall as correct. As correct. If it's already correct, does it need to be corrected?
No.
If all of a sudden the human remains left behind after birth, if that evidences the maternal soil still attached to a piece of you, is that correct according to the National Institutes of Health of the United States?
No.
So the fetal-maternal placenta, the 92-chromosome chimera monstrosity, the tertium quid that evidences both you and mom's biology as the infant member, is that correct according to the National Institutes of Health?
No.
No. So it's not healthy. To recognize or recognize or acknowledge the infant over and over and over every 365 days, that evidences illness. It evidences dis-ease. It evidences dis-ease. By claiming a birth certificated character that evidences mother and child, mother, Madonna and child, Jesus and Mary, that measure, that piece that was cut off of you, that is weighed and measured separately with a different standard, maybe even, I'm just going to say it, maybe a metric system, an internationally weighed and measured, metrically internationally weighed and measured unit, an international unit that only is only recognized internationally. So if that piece is missing from you, and you're here in the present, but a piece of you that has been placed in the international realm, in the international system, in the international public, the only way you can evidence your equity is by knowing that that piece has been cut off of you, and by having the knowledge of that material, that equity. Again, equity is what? Equity is
your what you pay, it's your property. Equity.
It's justice according to natural law.
To natural law.
So the Justice Department, the Department of Justice, is doing what? It's bringing justice to something that you're breaking. It's reconnecting you with your godly origin through the Department of Justice, the United States Department of Justice. Remember that the United States has already said, according to the National Institutes of Health, that pre-implantation is correct. Pre-implantation is correct. If my 46 chromosomes is identical to the 46 chromosomes of the zygote, if I and my father are one, then this body is exactly the product of the zygote. So the zygote, which exists prior to implantation, and this biology that I'm using today, this body, this person that I'm using today, if the zygote and this body are one and the same, if I and my father are one, I'm evidencing my origin with the knowledge of the zygote. But if I claim the birth certificated person, I don't go far enough back in reality. I don't go back to my origin. I go only as far back as implantation. So when I claim the birth certificated person, the fetal maternal placental deposit, I don't go all the way back to God. I only go back to the residence. I only go back to where I abandoned my boat, the island. So when I keep claiming the birth certificated insular possession of the United States, which is the fetal maternal island, on the back of my book, First in Time, when I claim that birth certificated person, I never get back to God. I'm missing the entire first estate because I'm using the Gregorian calendar character. I'm using a narrative, a Judeo-Christian narrative that is born to a time frame known as Gregorian calendar, which is the civil law character. So the birth certificate of Gregorian calendar character only goes as far back as the moment of implantation. Now think about that. If I'm the indigenous person on the uterine wall, if I'm the only one, if I land in the uterine wall, I'm the only one there. I'm the first one there on that island.
Yeah.
It's never been discovered. That island only existed. It only evidences my existence. It doesn't evidence anybody else's existence. So when they happen to find or locate that island, whether it's a accretion or whether it's an avulsion. If it's an avulsion, it's evidencing my boat on the island. If it's an accretion, it's evidencing mom's biology. That's why I prefer the word avulsion, because it doesn't change the boundaries. If I discover my boat on that island, that boat is still mine. If I know that boat and my biology today are one and the same, that's an avulsion. That's an avulsion. It's not. I don't care about the accretion at that point. But again, the narrative, the capital G Genesis narrative, Linda, is a story or an account. It's an account.
Yep.
It's the account. It's the missing time that was cut off of you. It's the accounting of the time in the womb that has been forsaken or forgotten. That's the account. And I'm going to click on account real quick because this is pretty amazing. There it is. An account says a record of debit and credit entries to cover transactions involving a particular item or particular person or concern. It also says a statement or exposition of reasons, causes, or motives, but down there at 2C says a reason for an action, a basis. There's your action right there. Every single court action, the basis of every single court action, the basis of every single court action, the basis of every single court action is that maternal island. That's the foundation or the base upon which my boat sits. So when they are bringing a cause of action, a cause for an action based upon the maternal uterine wall accretion, but my boat is on that island, is on that accretion, is on that insular possession, so-called, of the United States. If my boat is on that island, then they have me requiring salvation, because that evidences it evidences a heathen on the land, but it also evidences a boat, a derelict vessel that needs to be salvaged. So you have the heathen, which needs salvation through the church, but you also have a derelict vessel, an unused vessel, a forgotten vessel on an island that requires salvage. So the church and state, or whatever, they have work to do. What happens when I'm whole? What happens when I have knowledge of fertilization, all present and accounted for from fertilization of last breath? Do I require salvage?
Nor salvation.
Nor salvation. I require neither. So it's the basis of their acts is the account, and the account goes back to the narrative, but as opposed to Genesis, the origin or coming into being of. Go ahead.
Of something. The origin or coming into being of something. Mm-hmm.
Of something of substance, of reality, not some story, not some narrative. And that's what I'm getting at is when we're in the womb, it's all substance. There's no name. What was your name upon the moment of fertilization?
No name.
There was no name. Hell, nobody even knows the exact moment. So if you're trying to get your equity from nature all the way back to the origin, which is fertilization, can you use a name if you want to claim equity?
Right. Doesn't look like it to me.
Say that again?
I said it doesn't look like it to me.
Well, the answer is no, because there is no name at that moment.
Right.
So, again, when you're trying to evidence equity, you have to do equity. And the only way I know how to claim my equity from the beginning, from fertilization, from my genuine origin, when I put evidence of the equity on the document, it would have to be a biomarker. It has to be biological, because that's the origin. My true genesis, lowercase g genesis, is genetic. So the only way I can evidence my equity, which is also evidencing justice. It's justice. I mean, from fertilization to last breath, all present and accounted for, I line up with justice. If I line up to the truth of the matter from fertilization on, I'm also aligning myself with justice. If I'm aligning myself with justice, can I ever be considered a fugitive from justice? Is a birth certificated person a fugitive from justice if they're not aligned with justice?
Yeah, very definitely.
Where have you heard fugitive from justice? Where was that?
Paupers, vagabonds, and fugitives from justice.
Here's why this is important again.
Yeah.
If the cut evidences an obstruction of justice, if equity is justice according to natural law, equity is justice according to natural law, and natural law begins at fertilization, then if anybody impedes that order, if anybody impedes that from fertilization to last breath, if they impede that progress, it doesn't matter how they do it. If they impede that progress, that's an obstruction of justice.
It's Article 1, Section 8
of
the Constitution.
All right, let's go to that. Articles of Constitution, Articles of there it is. It's the Privileges and Immunities Clause.
Right.
Look at this. I'm going to Law Cornell. I'm going to Cornell and the Privileges of Immunity Clause at Cornell Law. Article 4, Section 2, 111. Privileges and Immunity Clause. It says, Article 4, Section 2, Clause 1, the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all the privileges and immunities of citizens of the several states. It says the primary purpose, I'm reading this, of this clause, let me see if I can find, I want the actual verbiage. Here, I want to read this so it makes sense, because it came from the Federalist Papers. I'm going to go to the Articles of Confederation. It's in the Privileges and Immunities Clause, but I want to read it the way it was written originally, because I don't want to make this up. So 1788, James Madison, Federalist number 42. Federalist number 42. The number 42 is huge, by the way. Level 42, number 42. But it says number 42, 285-87, 22nd January, 1788. There it is. The dissimilarity in the rules of naturalization has long been remarked as a fault in our system and as laying a foundation for intricate and delicate questions. in the 4th Article of Confederation, it is declared that the free inhabitants of each of these states, comma, paupers, vagabonds, and fugitives from justice excepted, comma, shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of the free citizens, comma, in the several states, and the people of each state shall in every other enjoy all the privileges of trade and commerce, and etc. But see, it's really hard for people to see this, but it says in the 4th Article of Confederation, it is declared that the free inhabitants of each of these states, comma, paupers, vagabonds, and fugitives from justice excepted, comma, shall be entitled. So what he's saying is that paupers, vagabonds, and fugitives from justice they are not entitled to the privileges and immunities. Paupers, vagabonds, and fugitives from justice are not entitled.
Yep.
So paupers have no property, vagabonds have no home, and fugitives from justice have turned their back on natural law. No property is a pauper. Do spiritual mendicants, do followers of religions that have taken a vow of poverty, do they own property?
No.
So a true Christian or a follower of Christianity that somewhere in the rule book of Christianity, they are now part of some spiritual order that has what? Taken vows of poverty as mendicants, as those out there spreading the word, a pauper. So a Christian who owns no property or has all his property held in trust doesn't have any ownership, and if he doesn't own anything, he doesn't own any property either. And, of course, that's a pauper. And, of course, all rights are associated with property, so if you own no property, you own no rights. You have no rights.
Yep.
A vagabond, no home. A wanderer, somebody just wandering around because you have no home. Well, what happens if your home is with you all the time, in your mind and memory, all present and accounted for, My home. I mean, think about this realistically. I'm created. I float in space for a while. I land in the uterine wall. I land. If I don't land, I'm lost in space. If I don't land in the uterine wall, I'm washed out. I'm washed out of the uterus. I don't exist. Even though I did exist, right. I don't exist. Now I land in the uterine wall, and 280 days later, I, the ship captain, Noah, come out. But I leave my boat behind. Yeah. Now I'm what? I'm on foot. Yep. But what do? They take my boat, they find my boat, and they give it another name. They give it a title. And then they turn it into a commercial ship, a commercial vessel. Yep. And then the only way I ever get to use that boat again is through a title created at the state level because they salvaged it. So now everything I do through that character, through that boat, belongs to its new owner. But that presumes that I've abandoned it. What happens if I'm still using it, Linda?
You haven't abandoned it.
I haven't abandoned it. And if I'm still using it today, I've been using it the whole time because I can't come back to it. Once my spirit leaves the body, I'm dead. My biology's been filled with the breath of God, the Spirit, since I was in the womb. Whether it's through Mom breathing for me or me breathing on my own, it's been one singular trip, one journey, one life, one. Not two, not three, one. So they're saying that paupers, vagabonds, and fugitives from justice are not entitled to privileges and immunities of free citizens in the several states. All they're saying here is they're agreeing with Cruden versus Neal. if I'm aligned with natural law, I go all the way back to the zygote. I go all the way back to God, all the way back to creation. If I don't align with natural law, I become a pauper, a vagabond, and a fugitive from justice. Now I don't have the privileges and immunities.
Right.
It's always going to be the opposite of what people think. Always. They speak in mirror language. So the reason I brought this up is because I want the idea of Genesis, I want people to recognize that natural law, it's in the Declaration of Independence, where they're saying when it's time for one people to dissolve the political connections, well, that's the fetal maternal placenta. That fetal maternal placenta evidence is a claim by Rome. They call it Caesar's section, a C-section, a cross-section. They're saying it belongs to Rome through Unum Sanctum, 1302. What I'm saying is that from fertilization to this moment, I'm the owner. I'm the king over that kingdom. I'm the sovereign supreme being over that kingdom. I think what they're doing is they're getting us by claiming the birth certificated person. We're creating a servitude, a religious servitude that we have to then perform if we want that birth certificated child. But I'm saying it's not necessary because the Gregorian calendar to which that child was born is a fiction. And fictio cedit veritati, fiction yields to truth. So Genesis is the beginning of something, whereas capital G Genesis is a religious narrative. Well, what's interesting about the Gregorian calendar, which is the calendar used for every birth certificate, it says the Gregorian calendar, I'm at Wikipedia, Linda. The Gregorian calendar is a calendar used in most parts of the world. It went into effect October 1582 following the papal bull Inter Gravissimus issued by Pope Gregory the 13th, which introduced it as a modification of or replacement for the Julian calendar, which is about a fortnight or 2 weeks apart at this point. The principal change was to space leap years differently, so as to make the average calendar year 365 point some days long, more approximating the tropical or solar year that is determined by Earth's revolution around the sun. Let me go to, I'm going to go to, it says, I'm down at a paragraph down below, where it says the reform was adopted initially by Catholic countries. There it is right there. The reform was adopted initially by Catholic countries of Europe and their overseas possessions. Well, if Spain, if Columbus claimed the Americas, that'd be North, Central, and South, if Columbus claimed the Americas for Latin Catholic Spain and Isabella back then, and through Inter Cetera, 1493, the Pope is saying that the Americas are Catholic through his claim. Then the Americas are considered Catholic according to Rome. So now you have a Gregorian calendar for the Americas. The Americas. Now I didn't say the United States, did I? Okay. It says over the next 3 centuries, the Protestant and Eastern Orthodox country also gradually moved to what they called the improved calendar. It says with Greece being the last European country to adopt a calendar for civil use only in 1923. However, many Orthodox churches continue to use the Julian calendar for religious rites and dating of major feasts. I'm going to go to Anno Domini calendar for one reason. A-N-N-O Domini. Calendar. Wiki. Okay. The Anno Domini calendar says the terms Anno Domini AD and BC are used when designating years in the Julian and Gregorian calendars. The term Anno Domini is medieval Latin and means in the year of the Lord, but is often presented using the year or our Lord instead of the Lord, taken from the full original phrase Anno Domini Nostri Jesu Christe, which translates to the year of our Lord, Jesus Christ. The calendar is based on the traditionally reckoned year, the traditionally reckoned, traditional versus modern, the traditionally reckoned year of the conception or birth of Jesus, the conception or birth of Jesus. Remember that conception means implantation. So it says the conception or birth of Jesus. So when the conception occurs, when implantation occurs, in their narrative, Jesus is created. Remember, this is a immaculate conception, which means no man had sex with a woman to create this character. What's the only thing created at conception that is not a product of sperm and ovum?
The accretion, the mother's uterine wall accretion.
So mother's accretion. The what?
Well, I was just going to use more biological, but it's basically what's formed so the baby can grow. It's the placenta, the mother's placenta that's
the mother's piece of the placenta.
The mother's piece of the placenta, yes.
Because the placenta is both baby and mom. Yeah. And again, we want to make sure people don't think that the placenta is mom's property, because it's not. Only the maternal part of the placenta is mom's property. But it does say the calendar era, calendar era. And, of course, when I put my cursor over calendar era, it says the calendar era is a period of time elapsed since one epoch of a calendar and if it exists, before the next one. For example, it is the year 2024 is per Gregorian calendar, which numbers its years in the Western Christian era. So again, Western Christian era, Gregorian calendar. So calendar era is based on the traditionally reckoned year of the conception or birth of Jesus, AD, counting years from the start of this epoch, and BC denoting years before the start of that era. There is no year 0 in this scheme. Thus, the year AD 1 immediately follows 1 BC. This dating system was devised in 525 by Dionysius Exiguus, but was not widely used until the 9th century. What I'm getting at is there's no year 1 or no year 0. So it begins at 1. So if the Anno Domini Gregorian calendar begins at 1, that means from 0 to 1 is missing. If it begins at 1, 0 to 1 is missing. Think about that. So 0 to 1 is all the time in the womb. So none of the time in the womb is accounted for in the Gregorian calendar or the Anno Mundi calendar, which is also known as the civil calendar, which means none of the pagan time is considered. Think about that. Only the record is the historical record. So time begins with Chronos, or Father Time, with the historical record. Is there any time in the womb? Is there any calendar that affects the things happening in the womb?
The Anno Mundi includes it.
Is there any calendar for what is actually happening in the womb? If the womb is nature, Right, because the even the Anno Mundi calendar is man-made. It's an idea created by man. Remember that Cruden versus Neal says that there, in nature, every man is independent of all laws except those prescribed by nature. Is the Anno Mundi calendar nature?
No.
No. It's another man's idea. So if you subscribe to the Jewish calendar, Anno Mundi calendar, you're going to be subject to the laws of the Noahic laws or something Jewish or whatever. The point is that that's man-made too. So in the womb there is no time.
No.
It's considered literally oceanic or prehistory or prehistoric. Everything happening in the womb is prehistoric. It's prehistory. Mm-hmm. So again, if the historical record begins somewhere, especially the Gregorian calendar, it begins at year 1. So everything happening before that first year anniversary is not even part of the record. When I see something like that, I'm going, what are they trying to take? What is it that in the first year, Linda, that what seems like something they'd be taking if the first year of existence is not on the record? I say that that's available for the taking or the first fruits. When they start talking about first fruits and rights to first fruits and all that nonsense that there are people that claim to have rights to first fruits, I'm looking at that going, okay, what's the first fruits? What's being taken? But if we forget about it, it makes it available for somebody else to find. Again, if that's our natural law equity and we volunteer away our equity by not even acknowledging from 0 to 1, remember, equity doesn't aid a volunteer, so if we leave that 0 to 1 behind, we make it available for somebody to find or pick it up or become the gratuitous bailee for or whatever. But if we don't acknowledge 0 to 1, somebody else will take that up and go, oh, this is made available by a voluntary action of its owner. So the presumption is you abandon it. You abandon the time in the womb. You abandon your link to God. And now you need a middleman to get you back there. You need somebody to help you cross the interstate space created by the cut, by the separation.
Yeah, I mean, it's your connection to God. It's your origin. Up for anybody to grab. I don't acknowledge that it exists.
Well, what's really weird is that, remember that we were talking about the district.
Mm-hmm.
And I had 3 things happening in 1871. The creation of the District of Columbia. Remember, pagans were marked off. Pagans had markers that marked or fixed the position of their pagan society or their good country life out there, their rural life. They were fixed. They had fixed markers, almost like a colony or a colony of lepers. I'm just throwing it out there. But look at what's really weird about the district was for what? Pagans. It was marked off for pagans. Well, go to the definition of Columbia at Webster's, and it says the United States. Columbia. The definition of Columbia is the United States. I'm going to go to etymology again just for the heck of it because I'm trying to tie all this together. I'm going to etymology and I'm going to type in Columbia because remember, the Organic Act of 1871 was establishing the District of Columbia. District, again, goes back to pagan, a fixed position or a marker for paganism. District of Columbia. And, of course, Columbia, I'm going to go to Columbia right now at etymology.
Mm-hmm.
What does Columbia say? It says a poetic name for United States of America earlier for the British colonies there, 1730s. Also the nation's female personification from named Christopher Columbus, blah, blah, blah. But look what it says here. Columbia, Linda, says poetic name for United States of America. But then it says earlier for the British colonies there. So the 13 original British colonies, look what it says here, a popular name for places and institutions in the U.S. in the post-revolutionary years, when former tributes to king and crown were out of fashion, such as Columbia University. I'm sorry, what?
No, I just made an exclamation.
It said founded in 1754 as King's College, blah, 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 Columbia. To abbreviate, I'm at D.C. now. You keep scrolling down. District of Columbia, apparently not widely used before 1820, but eventually it became necessary to distinguish the place from the many other Washingtons in America. The city and district were named in 1791, at first known as Territory of Columbia. The territory was organized as a district in 1801, but the towns within it, Washington, Georgetown, Alexandria, remained separate municipalities, and at one time all took D.C. The district was effectively organized as a unitary municipality in 1871. A unitary municipality. Unitary. Remember earlier in this conversation I talked about an international unit?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
An international unit. And I was talking about the feto-maternal measure, the biometric cut, when they clamp, cut, and weigh the afterbirth, specifically the placenta, almost like the pound of flesh that they talk about in the Merchant of Venice. When they weigh that and measure it, it's a biometric cut. It's biometric. Metric is international. So when they cut that, weigh it, and give it, and they personify it by giving it a title, Curtis Richard Kallenbach. Remember that it's international. Remember that in 1933, FDR created a what? What nation? A consecrated nation.
Yeah.
Consecrated. So that means holy nation. It's my belief that the nations of which they speak are Christian nations. Nations under God. Under God.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at this, it says the district was effectively organized. Effective. Remember, baggage and effects. 22 U.S.C. 288B, when an owner arrives in connection with his baggage and effects. The owner's the baby, the umbilical cord and extra-embryonic material is the baggage, and the maternal accretion, which is the dowry, is the effects. It's personal effects. Because it was attached. It was attached to my person, my body. So it's personal effects. Look what it says here. The district was effectively organized as a unitary municipality. Municipal means corporate. Unitary is the feto-maternal combination, the electrum, known as what? A tertium quid. And of course, if I go to tertium quid real quick, I'm on the flow here. Tertium quid. Look what it says here. Remember, I just said that the feto-maternal placenta is a unit, an international unit. Tertium quid, Wikipedia talks about, refers to an unidentified third element that is in combination with two known ones. Feto is known, my fetal biology, maternal, mom's biology. They're two known ones, but when the placenta is looked at as one thing, one item, it becomes a third thing in their world, a third thing, a tertium quid, a third person, a third party. So the fetal-maternal placenta is an international unit. It's a measure. It's a cut. It's an amount. It's a quantity. It's a standard that they're using to keep the peace. But let me go down one further here. In Christology in Tertium Quid, it says the Christological debates of the 4th century, it was used to the followers of Apollinaris, who spoke of Christ as something neither human nor divine, but a mixture of the two in a mysterious and inseparable way, and therefore a third thing. That fetal-maternal placenta has me located in the present and a piece of me located in an international situation attached to an island of mom. So there's me, the baby, there's the extraembryonic boat that I was once in that is still on top of an island, a piece of mom, and accretion. So let's use the proper terms. There's me, the owner of the entire godly estate. Then there's the cut piece of me, which is an avulsion, on an island, which is an accretion. When you know all of that, you'll recognize that the fetal-maternal placenta is a mixture of the mysterious and inseparable. The mysterious or the mystery is my biology, the Jesus part, but it's inseparable from the handmaiden or uterine wall of mom. It's inseparable. It's inseparable. So now you look at this fetal-maternal and you go, the United States, Linda, at the National Institutes of Health recognize what as healthy? Recognize what?
Preimplantation.
The preimplantation, which is the pure 46 chromosome version of me. The United States recognizes that. But if you add the maternal part of the placenta, that's like shitting the bed or soiling yourself with some addition, an excess. It's excessive. And the word would be indulgent. It's too much. It's not just me anymore. It's me and mom. That would be an indulgence. And that's what the church, that's what the Vatican is selling. They're selling indulgences. The birth certificated fetal-maternal placenta is the tertium quid, but it's an indulgence. The birth certificate is a certificate of indulgence. The indulgent part is mom's biology attached to me, the mother church. And of course, that's Rome, the mother church, the mother of Rome. Now, I wanted that to be known because the placenta evidences both my perfection, my biology, and the Americas, or the maternal part, the maternal church, which is mom's accretion. The placenta evidences both, which is a treaty between the United States and Rome. So the placenta becomes the bond between the fetal bond, my bond, the bond between me and Rome. Rome being the mother church, evidenced by the accretion of the placenta. That's why the Declaration of Independence talks about what? Dissolving the political bond. The political bands. They're dissolving the rule of Rome in the Declaration of Independence, but they're looking at the placenta saying, listen, we know what is our property, what is directly linked to God, but we also know your narrative, which is Jesus and Mary, which is the afterbirth human creature used in Unum Sanctum for Rome's C-section claim, cesarean section. They're using the fetal maternal afterbirth. They're claiming that. But realistically, what they're doing is they're saying the Pope has control over everything, the state of Rome and the Church of Rome. So when you bring the birth certificated fetal maternal Madonna and child into question, into play, inadvertently or on purpose, that's you giving your equity, your natural equity, over to another. You're letting somebody else take hold of that and control it. By you letting them control you through the cord or through that record, you are now possessed. Just like in the movie The Exorcist, you are now possessed by the owner of that fetal maternal character, the Gregorian calendar character. You're possessed by it. If I believe I'm Curtis Richard Kallenbach, then I'm possessed by Curtis Richard Kallenbach. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And whoever created Curtis Richard Kallenbach, okay, so that's the whole idea with the District of Columbia. 1871, what they're doing is they're using this material that has been cut off of you, that you have abandoned, that has fallen to the ground, figuratively speaking. So again, think about that. Baby comes out of mom. They clamp and cut the umbilical cord, and they let it fall away from you, disconnected from you, separated from you, removed from you violently with a cut. Remember, to cut is to pierce. It's almost like the piercing of Jesus' side and hanging him up on the cross. By the way, does that piece of you that they cut off, does it move with you in the present moment? If you're the baby out there in the present, what happens to this piece of you that gets frozen in time on this Gregorian calendar? What happens to it?
It's in a fixed position.
It is in a fixed position. Well, and what's really weird is this is opposite of what I've always been thinking, but the fixed position is according to the word fix, F-I-X, it's also the pagan.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. The pagan is nature. Is not the zygote part of natural law?
Yeah.
So there it is. It can go either way. I think that the zygote evidences natural law from fertilization. The fetal maternal placenta evidences a narrative, a Judeo-Christian narrative that includes, 0 to 1, because part of my biology, the infant biology, begins at fertilization. So that's the 0 part. The maternal part, the accretion, the Mary, the church, is the uterine wall accretion. That's the Christian part. So when you put the feto-maternal placenta and you evidence that as one single thing, you're evidencing the tertium quid, or the mixture of the mysterious and inseparable feto-maternal position. That's Latin Catholicism, Jesus and Mary. So look at this. The placenta can go either way. It can evidence you in your perfection, you know what I mean, just stopping over as a resident of the uterine wall, because here you are today, which would mean equity. That would evidence equity. But if you claim the birthday and you only claim the fetal maternal position, you don't get anything in front of it. You don't get the creation. You don't get fertilization. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You have to have knowledge of fertilization, because in the absence of knowledge of fertilization, you don't get the equity of the stopover. You don't get the right-of-way of the stopover. You see what I'm getting at? In the womb. You don't get that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You have to know all of it in order to actually have the equity. And, of course, equity is defined as justice according to natural law, not man-made ideas or birth certificated persons.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the reason all of that's important is because now all we have to do is go to Haslam versus Lockwood. At Webster, at Wiki. We've talked about this on and off for years. But Haslam versus Lockwood is an 1871 court case. It correlates directly when you find out that what the case was about. The case happened at perfect timing for the Organic Act of 1871 and the District of Columbia to come into play. Haslam versus Lockwood, it says, is an important United States case in property, tort, conversion, trover, and nuisance law. Here it is. This is such an amazing case to me. It says the plaintiff directed his servants to rake abandoned horse manure into heaps that had accumulated in a public street, intending to carry it away the next day. Before he could do so, the defendant, who had no knowledge of the plaintiff's actions, found the heaps and hauled them off to his own land. The plaintiff sued the defendant in trover, demanding payment for the price of the manure. The trial court held for the defendant, stating that he owed nothing to the plaintiff. The plaintiff appealed, and the appellate court of Connecticut held for the plaintiff, remanding the case for a new trial. So one guy sends his guys out to the street. Remember, this is 1871 or 1870. Yeah, 1870, 71. So these horses are pulling carriages, or these horses are going down these streets, the public road. And as they're walking down the road, of course, horses are just pooping everywhere, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the horse poop is considered by most people to be a biohazard or waste material. Waste.
Mm-hmm.
But for a farmer, it's not waste. So you got this guy sending his servants out there to rake this horse poop, this waste material, this manure, into heaps.
Mm-hmm.
And he calls them heaps. And he's gonna go back tomorrow, the next day, and pick up these heaps that were raked by his guys, by his servants. But before he could do that, somebody else came, and they found all this horse poop heaped up into these piles, into these heaps, and he carried them away to his own land. So he's going to put this horse poop on his land. But he didn't know the other guy raked him into heaps, intended to take them. So now the first guy, the guy that raked him into heaps, is now suing the second guy. Okay, now here's the thing. It says the manure originally belonged to the owners of the horses that dropped it. But the owners abandoned it on the road. But when the owners abandoned it on the road, it became the property of the man who was first to claim it. The court found that the best owner after the act of abandonment was the borough of Stamford, Connecticut, where the manure was found. All right, let's look at baby. Mom walks into the hospital. Mom is carrying Kurt. Mom is carrying a new supreme being in her womb. Mom walks into the Swedish American Hospital in Rockford, Illinois. She signs in. She signs in as just a woman, Marianne Kallenbach. Does she sign in for the being that she's carrying in her womb? No. She signs in for herself. So now there's no acknowledgement of carrying anything into the hospital. She's not coming into the country carrying some contraband in her womb, although it might be viewed that way later on. I mean, is she bringing a new being into a country that's in her womb? Is this contraband? Are they looking at this being as a stowaway in a mothership? Are they looking at this? Are they saying that eventually whoever comes in on this boat, on this mothership, is going to become an indentured servant for the price of delivery? Is that what's going to happen down the road? It sounds like it to me. But anyway, what I'm getting at is Mom walks into the hospital. She does not acknowledge what she's carrying. She goes up to the 4th floor, and then she does what? A little later on, September 19th at 3:50 a.m., a baby comes out. Now, the baby was not no, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't a medical delivery, but yeah.
A baby comes out, and the baby's attached to an umbilical cord, which is crossing the threshold, still going back into the womb, and attached to the uterine wall typically. They clamp and cut the cord. Now, baby is separate from the umbilical cord and extraembryonic material. So, according to the definition, medical definition of delivery, a delivery has not occurred.
Correct.
Because a delivery, according to the medical definition, is a fetus and its membranes. In the womb, the baby, the fetus, the umbilical, and extraembryonic is all one kingdom.
One king. Yeah, one kingdom.
With one king. With one king. Baby comes out, they clamp and cut that sovereign, they clamp and cut the prince, they clamp and cut
the cord.
That estate apart. They cut the estate apart.
Yeah.
There is no delivery. By definition, the fetus, which changes terms to baby outside the womb, the fetus was not delivered, still connected to his baggage and effects. He was separated. That's what I'm calling the cloak. I'm saying that material that they cut off the baby is the baby's religious garb or original clothing in the womb, which becomes the vestment or the religious or spiritual vestment that they're holding for the baby when he needs them as equity down the road in the court system. Now, here's the thing. That material that was cut off a baby figuratively falls to the ground. If baby doesn't know about it or baby doesn't want it, that becomes a presumption of abandonment. So now baby is leaving behind this biology. Inadvertently in all cases, I'm going to be honest with you, because no baby is saying, cut this off of me, cut this off of me. No baby's saying that. So when they surgically remove, I call it either an abortion or because all that material is aborted. But when they clamp and cut the cord, they're basically performing a surgery on the baby. I call it they have amputated an organ. They have now amputated an organ or a limb off the baby. That amputation results in a defective legal position because the baby doesn't have his baggage and effects, and the baggage and effects have been separated from its owner. That's why 22 U.S.C. 288B is so important, because it says when the owner arrives in connection with his baggage and effects, there is no duty to perform and there's no IRS tax issues. Because when you're whole, W-H-O-L-E, when you're whole, that's equity. That evidence is equity. So look what it says here, Haslam versus Lockwood. They're saying that the court found that the best owner after the act of abandonment was the borough of Stanford. The borough of Stanford. So that means where the poop fell is the place where they have the best claim, the superior claim. But it requires an abandonment by the owner of the horses. So think about that. If the material cut off of you is not purposely, intentionally abandoned, it is not abandoned. And if it's not abandoned at all, it's not available for any other to find, pick up, carry away, to do anything with it. If you do not intend to abandon your biology, your godly biology, then none of this court case can happen. Nobody can rake it up into heaps. Nobody can carry it away. If it's not actually abandoned, the owners still have a right to it. They have the only rights to it. That's the point. But so Haslam versus Lockwood is a case where what they wanted to do was separate waste material that has fallen to a public road. They wanted to make sure that waste material was available according to a court case. They want to make sure that, listen, wherever this material falls, that is where it's going to become available. The District of Columbia. Columbia now means what? The United States? But the district means what? Pagan.
Pagan.
It's where something is fixed, a fixed position of something. So when they clamp and cut the cord and they allow that piece to fall to the ground, it becomes waste material, according to them. And now where you were wasted, where you got wasted, where you left behind your godly origin, or you hang it up on a cross with that marker or that stake in the ground, that's the location of where you fell, and that's who has the claim. That's who has the first rights for that property. So on the back of my book, you're looking at a boat on an island. Of course, they call it, the island, an insular possession of the United States. And the United States means Columbia. Remember that. Columbia and the United States are one and the same. And if my boat is still on that island, it's an insular possession of Columbia, the District of Columbia. So where they presume it to have fallen is within the federal, small f federal, United States. Federal means man's covenant with God. So the United States is saying they have to preserve, they have to protect that infant. It's their job to protect it. Mm-hmm. Hell, they call it PHI at Health and Human Services, Protected Health Information. They call it PHI. That's the cut material. Mm-hmm. At the federal level, they call it 1 USC 8, infant member. Yep. But they're protecting it because you presumably have abandoned it. So they're taking God's material, the godly material, and they're placing it in a lost and found in a trust. And then they're acting as the bailee, the gratuitous bailee that has to protect that material. That's the District of Columbia. And, of course, where does this waste material fall? It falls into their possession. And, of course, the District of Columbia was created the same year as this waste material was identified. Let me keep reading this. It says, the court found that the best owner after the act of abandonment, well, there it is right there. So abandonment is necessary in order for somebody to find this material or discover it. Hell, the courts even use the word discovery. Did you do your discovery, Mr. Attorney? Yeah, they're discovering something. They're uncovering something as if it were lost. Mm-hmm. Are you still using that material today?
Yeah.
If you're still using it today, is it available to be discovered?
No.
No. And if you're still using it today, from fertilization to this moment, is it available for conversion?
No.
No, nobody can convert it to their use. If you're still using it, you never abandon it. And if you never abandon it, it's not available for conversion.
Correct.
So again, the District of Columbia was created specifically to receive this fallen biology. It's almost like it's Hotel California. In the hospitals, the Knights Hospitallers or the Hospitallers, what are they doing? They're collecting Christian pilgrims that have fallen on the shore, that have been disabled at the shoreline. I'm going to go to Hospitallers real quick because the cut material becomes the injured pilgrim, the injured Christian pilgrim. Hospitallers. I'm going to Wiki. Knights of Malta Hospitallers. Knights Hospitaller. Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
The Order of Knights of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem, commonly known as Knights Hospitaller. By the way, the island of St. John
is Puerto Rico.
And where is the IRS located?
In Puerto Rico.
In Puerto Rico. So the Knights are the Knights Hospital, the Knights, the Order of Knights of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem, Puerto Rico. are they taking this cut as a Christian pilgrim? Let me read here. It says, the Hospitallers arose early in the 12th century during the height of the Cluniac movement, a reformist movement within the Benedictine monastic order that sought to strengthen religious devotion and charity for the poor. Earlier in the 11th century, merchants from Amalfi founded a hospital in Jerusalem dedicated to John the Baptist to care for sick, poor, or injured Christian pilgrims to the Holy Land. Well, what's the Holy Land, Linda?
The Holy Land is it'd be the accretion, wouldn't it?
It's the accretion. So again, it says care for sick, poor, or injured Christian pilgrims. Is that not the boat, or is that not the vessel left behind on the island, the accretion, the maternal wall accretion in the placenta? Does that not evidence a sick, poor, or injured Christian pilgrim?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes, and it happens in the hospital. So they're collecting this material that shows up on the shoreline. It washes ashore like a shell washing ashore. Of course, then they do what? They create a shell corporation for it. And the corporation then becomes subject to the municipality, the municipal. So this feto-maternal shell that's evidencing the Jesus and Mary Holy Grail aspect is now subject to the Order of Knights of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem through the IRS in St. John, or the 51st state known as
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico. And of course, if you look at the Puerto Rican flag, I'm going to go to Puerto Rico real quick. I love this stuff because the story, the narrative is amazing, and they can use real biology. So when they clamp and cut the cord, and that link to God falls to the ground as a injured, poor, left behind Christian pilgrim on the shoreline of the New World. The Knights Hospitallers pick it up and go, hey, look what we got. We got a Christian, and, as he made it to the motherland. He made it to the beach, Linda, but we can't fight. He's injured. Mm-hmm. We're gonna help this. We're gonna place this Christian. We're gonna deposit this Christian's property or this Christian into, and in God we trust. Again, I'm going back to the idea of Haslam versus Lockwood when it says the court found that the best owner after the act of abandonment was the borough of Stanford. They're saying the same thing here, that the best owner of the material after it's abandoned, Linda, after it's abandoned, is the borough of Stanford. But realistically, anybody that can make a claim upon the fall, the location where it fell, did it fall in the hospital, in my case, Swedish American Hospital? Did it fall September 19th, 1960 at 3:50 a.m. in a frame of reference, a time frame? Did it fall in the county of Winnebago? Did it fall in the city of Rockford or township of Rockford? Did it fall to the ground in the state or state of Illinois? Did it fall to the ground of the Americas, which is known as Latin Catholic since Inter Cetera 1493? Did it fall to the ground of Americas? See, my point is that this narrative, this capital G narrative, the story that's created after the fall is a capital G genesis, whereas fertilization is the lower loop tail G genesis of something, of substance, of reality. So what did they do? The Civil War is what? Introducing a civil, i.e. Gregorian calendar character that falls in the Civil War to the ground of the District of Columbia so that those within the district can pick it up. I don't know, the Knights Hospitallers maybe. They can pick it up and say, listen, we're going to deposit this into this Holy Land Trust. Of course, my biology becomes what? The collateral, the Christian collateral. to the motherland or the holy ground of the accretion. So that Christian story now gets perpetuated through the Gregorian calendar, birth. Now, what do we have? In 1871, there are three things that I really wanted to focus on, but the third one, so we have what? We have the Organic Act of the District of Columbia, which is an outcome of the civil, i.e. Gregorian calendar, war. And, of course, the definition of war is what?
Just look that up yesterday.
To be, war at to be? War. And, of course, everything always, I know people get bored with these talks, but everything always goes back to the cut. It always goes back to the separation. It always goes back to that piece of you that has been presumably abandoned by you when in reality you're still using it. If you're still using the exact same biology that was created at fertilization, that means you've never abandoned it. You've never abandoned your godly origin, and that's my whole position here. Your equity begins at fertilization, and if you're still using that biology, that's evidence of your equity. But what they're really doing is they're saying, no, a piece of you that fell to the ground still attached to mom, the accretion, the maternal part of the placenta, that's like a fallen angel or a fallen man. And that's the Christian pilgrim that we're going to watch over, that we're going to take care of. But look at war at 2b. What does it say?
A struggle or competition between opposing forces or for a particular end.
So the Civil War, which begins, the word civil is the civil calendar, but the civil calendar is the Gregorian calendar. The Gregorian calendar is also the Anno Domini calendar that begins at the year 1. The Civil War over a particular end is you're linked to God. There's a war over God. Mm-hmm. And if you stick with nature, that includes God, by the way, because an act of God called fertilization is the beginning of your story. It's also the origin of the species. I call it where Darwin meets God. That particular end was cut off of you. So now there is a war over that particular end unless you know that you are all present and accounted for from fertilization to last breath. That includes the justice, i.e. equity, that originates with natural law. That's justice according to natural law is equity. Equity is natural law or begins at fertilization. The moment you claim an idea that is contrary to natural law, you are now subjecting yourself to man's ideas and man's laws. That's Cruden versus Neal.
Yeah, and equity does not aid a volunteer.
And equity doesn't aid a volunteer. And, of course, the civil law, one of my favorite ideas out of, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn, is the idea of antebellum, status quo antebellum, and because of the word antebellum, of course, it comes out of that movie I just quoted. But status quo antebellum is
everything is the same. The war, everything goes back to what had happened, what was before the war. So in our case, there is no cut. There's whole, only whole.
Yes, absolutely. Status quo antebellum is a Latin phrase meaning the situation as it existed before the war. I'm saying the war, Linda, is ultimately between heaven and earth. That's the war. When we don't know our true origin is fertilization, when we don't include the first estate in our knowledge base, when we only include the implantation, pregnancy, the immaculate conception or the idea of implantation, when we only know of the birthday and we abandon the first 7 days-ish in space, in the heavens, we are now going to war with the heavens, with God, over what is God's or what is natural law.
I'm saying that from fertilization to last breath, I am all present and accounted for, which means I'm not at war with the heavens. I'm not at war with Earth. This isn't Venus versus Mars, if you know what I mean. Status quo antebellum is saying, knowing about this equity prior to implantation, by refusing to acknowledge the separation, the cut, the fault itself, the cutting of the umbilical, by being a pacifist, it includes all of that time prior to implantation. I am not a fallen Christian soldier on the shore of the new world. I am whole. And that's why Jesus says, they that are whole need not a physician. I don't need to be fixed. I don't need to be repaired. I don't need to be reconnected. I don't need reconciliation. I don't need anybody to come along with their administrative process and pretend to do me justice when justice begins. Justice is according to natural law, which begin at fertilization. So again, status quo antebellum is saying the situation as it existed before the war, before the cut, before the existence of a particular end. Status quo antebellum. So again, going back to the Haslam versus Lockwood, if a piece of me falls to the ground and it's inside or staked, it's staked to the ground now. It doesn't move anymore. They're saying, we're going to put a time frame on this. We're going to call it Curtis Richard Kallenbach. We're going to address it as Curtis Richard Kallenbach, and it's going to go into a public record, a public record. Now, this is where you fell. This is where your garment, this is where your cloak, this is where your godly vestment is located. If you can't find this vestment when you need to put it on, when you go into heaven, you're going to have to wear this thing. In fact, this is your sport coat. This is the suit that's required to go into heaven. And that's the cut. That's the sovereign, wherever he may sojourn, with his regal retinue. So you got to know all of this, Linda. You got to know fertilization to the uterine wall implantation, because all that time is Genesis 2:2. That's all Genesis 2:2. That's the first estate. And then, of course, when you plant into the wall, and now you and mom, you and the motherland, you and the holy ground become what? Intertwined.
Yeah.
That's heaven and earth right there. That's evidence of heaven and earth. But it's also evidence of the second estate, royalty, nobility. But then from there, when you come out of the womb as baby, umbilical, and extra-embryonic, that would evidence the entire first, second, and third estate. But they don't do that. What they do is they clamp and cut the cord, and now you have this third estate. I'm going to go to estates of the realm again, because it's so ridiculous to think about it. Estates of the realm. The third estate is the baby, or the indigenous person on the land, also known as a peasant or bourgeoisie. That's the third estate. What happens when you're whole from the beginning, Linda, where the first, second, and third estate are all one?
All one. It's all mine.
Yeah, you have equity. You're evidencing equity. Even though the truth doesn't require that, it's in their realm, it's equity. Okay, so that's why the District of Columbia was created, so it could capture this fallen material. And of course, Columbia means United States. Columbia is just a weird. It also means what? The earlier. I better go to it because this is really going to be hard to say. Columbia.
Are we going to Columbia?
I'm going to Columbia at etymology. This is the part that's really hard for people, I think. It says Columbia, the poetic name for the United States of America, comma, earlier for the British colonies there, the 13 British colonies. Mm-hmm. Now listen how
I'm really going to split a hair here. Earlier for the British colonies there. So Columbia was the name that the 13 original British colonies were using. The district is the District of Columbia. Is that still the original British colonies?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It is only a question. Are they using the District of Columbia to mean the original 13 colonies that were still subject to Britain, still British colonies?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what's so weird about this. The United States says Columbia. Now, but it says Columbia is a poetic name for the United States of America. But I'm looking at the United States and America as two separate things that require a bond. The United States and America together are called the United States of America, but there has to be a bond between the United States and America. Remember, America always used silver in its money or monetary system, and the United States always used gold. So that evidence is two different governments, two different systems. So there has to be a bond between those two different systems. And I'm saying that the placenta, the fetal-maternal placenta, evidences the bond between heaven and earth. Heaven begins at fertilization and God, whereas earth begins at implantation and mother. Mm-hmm. So the bond, the fetal-maternal placenta, evidences a bond between heaven and earth. What happens when you don't claim a birthday? And this sounds contrary to what I've been saying, but if you know fertilization of last breath, does your stopover in the uterine wall, is that included?
Mm-hmm.
Sure it is.
Absolutely.
It's just part of it's evolutionary due process. I mean, stopping in the uterine wall is necessary for me to be living today, but it's just part of evolutionary due process. It's nothing out of the ordinary. It's nothing out of the ordinary. But going back and reclaiming such infancy or residency as a 64-year-old man, that's a little bit extravagant. That might be a tad bit indulgent. Going back and wanting, to be, supplied everything by mother. That sounds like the welfare state to me. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is the District of Columbia. If Columbia identifies or was the original 13 British colonies, Linda, could the District of Columbia also evidence a British concept? Did the District of Columbia, through the Organic Act, did Great Britain or did England capture a territory, is the District of Columbia a Trojan horse? Mm-hmm. Where the characters, all the birth certificates, all the material, the waste material, the presumed waste material, gets collected into a character that stays within that district. There's a third thing that I wanted to introduce here that we've talked about before, but another thing that happened in 1871 that correlates directly with this is the definition of phantom limb. Mm-hmm. Phantom limb. I'm going to phantom limb at Wikipedia. A phantom limb. It says a phantom limb is the sensation. The phantom limb is a sensation that an amputated or missing limb is still attached. Is that not? If they clamp and cut the umbilical cord, and the umbilical cord is a limb, and it is by definition, just so you know. So the missing limb, the umbilical cord and the extraembryonic or the placenta, once they cut that off, if they give it a birthday, if we celebrate that limb that has been excised from us, if we keep celebrating the limb, are we not oriented still towards the limb? I mean, if the birth certificated person is the phantom limb, not only is it a phantom, a ghost, but it's also the ghost of the limb, of the biology that was cut off of us.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. If Curtis Richard Kallenbach is the cut off limb, it is the phantom limb character
Mm-hmm.
that I keep in play, and I'm suffering the pain from that character. I'm suffering the pain from that infancy.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm suffering the pain, the phantom limb pain of that character, what's another word for the phantom limb pain? Please say it.
Another word for the phantom limb pain.
What would be another word for the suffering? What would be the words if I'm still continuing to this day to suffer the infancy because of the phantom limb? What would you call it? What would be the greatest word you could use when standing up to knowing this, when standing up to a judge? What would be the words, the smartest words you could use? If you're a 70-year-old woman and I'm a 64-year-old man, and they're going to treat me like an infant due to the phantom limb, what would that be called?
I have a whole lot of words in my head, but I'm not sure which one you want.
If the Gregorian calendar character and its infancy were to influence the decision of the court,
mm-hmm. It'd be undue influence.
It'd be undue influence.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that the phantom limb then is undue influence. The cut off limb, the part that you're still suffering, the start that you still feel pain for, the pain itself is the infancy.
Mm-hmm.
The 70-year-old woman, the 60, yes, you're suffering infancy. That's the undue influence.
Yeah, well, it is suffering, so it is undue influence due to suffering.
And that's the phantom limb. So think about. I know the whole thing for me was that the cut material, the Civil War was to introduce, to make sure that the Gregorian calendar character was in play, because civil law is based upon the Gregorian calendar character. The Gregorian calendar character is a civil law character, but it's also created by the Pope in 1582. So the character born to that timeline is framed. It's a frame up. That character is framed by that calendar, and that calendar evidences Christian pilgrims washing ashore. That's it. So that's it. That's what the Gregorian calendar evidences, a Christian pilgrim that requires the help of that Christian society. That's what it is. So, and that's the phantom limb. If you understand that the cut allows for this to happen in substance, and then, of course, they give that human remains, the left behind rest, residue, and remainder of your fetal biology, they give that a title, and that would be a title of nobility because it's the second estate. The fetal maternal placenta evidences implantation, evidences that immaculate conception. That's the second estate. But that immaculate conception and that title of nobility is also the evidence of it evidences both, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at, because it has the earliest vestige of your origin attached to the maternal wall accretion. That's heaven and earth bound together. That's the evidence of heaven and earth bound together. So if you look at the first estate, which is pre-implantation, that's the United States, remember. The United States says what? The United States still recognizes as correct pre-implantation. Pre-implantation is you before you plant into the uterine wall. That is before the fetal-maternal Jesus and Mary. So creation is included in the first estate. But the Immaculate Conception is not included in the first estate. That's the second estate. So the birth certificate is a title of nobility, but it also is evidencing what? I mean, a title of nobility doesn't seem like such a bad thing until you realize that the United States frowns upon titles of nobility. But a title of nobility is a man-made thing. So the birthday or birth certificate evidences a title of nobility, which is evidencing only implantation. It's not evidencing the whole story. That's the why the United States says the National Institutes of Health do what? They say that the pre-implantation is correct, which means that's what's correct. Everything else is not correct. So from fertilization to this moment, I'm in agreement with creation and the United States. Remember Columbia also, right? Columbia?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Remember, the definition of Columbia is the United States. So if the United States National Institutes of Health says that pre-implantation is correct, then the United States and Columbia both are saying pre-implantation is correct. So now, if Columbia, though, was a word for the original 13 colonies, now you're going back to England and their claim. But remember that in their system, Cruden versus Neal still exists as well. And they're saying that in nature, every man is independent of all laws except those prescribed by nature. So everybody agrees. Everybody, Linda, agrees from fertilization to last breath, all present and accounted for. That's in alignment with truth. And then all of the fictions have to be set aside, fictio sit et veritati, because John 8:32 says, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. There is no detail that you can get out from under. Every single thing that has been separated from the entirety or from the whole, any little piece of you that's left out, any moment in time, from fertilization to last breath, Linda, is one unbroken lifetime. If they take 1 second out of there, one moment in time out of that continuous and contiguous journey, if they take one moment out of there and place and put a timestamp on it and an address, Curtis Richard Kallenbach, September 19th, 1960, 3:50 a.m., and they pull that out of that unbroken, uncut, perfect, innocent lifetime, that becomes a detail. Mm-hmm. If they subdivide my life with a second or a minute or an hour or a date, a calendar date, it doesn't matter what. If they separate any one of those moments, that's a detail. And that's where the devil lives. The devil lives in the separation of the whole, in the breaking apart of the whole. If your whole life begins at fertilization and ends with last breath, that's why 1 Corinthians 2:15 says the spiritual man shall be judged by no man, which means from fertilization to last breath, as long as you're breathing, as long as it's one unbroken, uncut lifetime, you have equity, and equity is the thing that pays the bill, whether it's through the Fifth Amendment life and limb, or it's Jesus, paying the bill with his execution, with his own blood. It's all equity, and it's all yours, unless you claim something contrary.
Right, and any way that any moment in time is used. So that's why it's so important to know about undue influence.
Yeah, because the infancy itself, the undue influence of the Gregorian calendar infant becomes an obstruction of justice, because justice is according to natural law, and natural law begins at fertilization and ends with last breath. So anything that impedes the forward progress of nature is an obstruction of justice. Mm-hmm. The birthday is an obstruction of justice. Mm-hmm. The birthday is an obstruction of justice, and they're using your own biology as a deposit that you presumably abandoned at the port of entry. They're using that. They're presuming that you're volunteering away your equity. That's the presumption. Mm-hmm. And the moment you say the government, and you're referring to a 1789 constitutional government, if you're claiming that as your government, you have abandoned your own self-governance. So now you've given your equity away, because it's obvious by claiming the government and including yourself in the corporate municipal government of the District of Columbia, you've chosen a corporate position, a franchise. You've chosen it yourself. Now you've abandoned your equity. It's contrary to what everybody thinks they should be doing. I'm going to go to I know we only got a minute or two left. But let's go to waste in Black's Law.
Okay.
Waste, because remember, Haslam versus Lockwood is about what's something that's presumed to be waste material falling from the horses, and of course, if the owners of the horses allow that material to lay on the public road, becoming accessible to others to find or to rake up into heaps, like the public DNA pool, or like the afterbirth that they're collecting, presuming everybody, is okay with that. I'm just saying Haslam versus Lockwood is about waste material. Mm-hmm. Waste. That's why I like when people back in the 70s, and Linda, what's that?
It's on page 1425.
So imagine somebody saying, "Man, I'm so wasted." Mm-hmm. Man, what a waste case. What a waste. Waste. An abuse or destructive use of property by one in rightful possession to spoil or destruction done or permitted to lands, houses, gardens, trees, or other corporeal hereditaments by the tenant thereof, to the prejudice of the heir or of him in reversion or remainder.
Wow.
The abuse, an abuse or destructive use. An abuse, ab-use, non-use.
None. Yeah.
If I abandon my life, my presence, by claiming a birth certificated fetal maternal character stranded on an island, if I abandon my own presence and revert to infancy, the undue influence of infancy, that's abuse. If I abandon my travel, my time in the womb, that's abuse. And of course, when they give that time in the womb a title, Curtis Richard Kallenbach, and they call that title character a child of God, that's child abuse.
Mm-hmm.
What if I use that child and its issued Social Security number to go get a job? To go get a job. Mm-hmm. That's child abuse. Mm-hmm. What if I take that child that has a Social Security number and I put it to work?
Child abuse.
It could be considered prostitution. Child prostitution. Mm-hmm. Does anybody know that by using that child, that cut-off piece, according to the Palermo Protocol, does anybody know that using that child is trafficking in persons? Mm-hmm. If you're using that birth certificated person, which was cut off and removed, that organ, by the very separation of that organ from the whole, is evidence of Trafficking in persons. Hell, at Article 3 at the Palermo Protocols, trafficking in persons is the removal of an organ.
Mm-hmm.
When people talk to me about pedophilia and the things some of these monsters are doing with children, but they don't recognize it in themselves, doing it with this child, the birth certificated child, they don't even recognize what they're saying. They don't realize they're condemning themselves every time they celebrate a birthday. Waste. Next paragraph. Destruction or material alteration. Destruction or material alteration or deterioration of the freehold or of the improvements forming a material part thereof by any person rightfully in possession, but who has not the fee title or the full estate. An unreasonable or improper use, abuse, mismanagement, or omission of duty touching real estate by one rightfully in possession, which results in its substantial injury. Material alteration. Is when they clamp and cut the cord, is that not an alteration?
Yeah.
If my life goes from fertilization to last breath as one, but they tailor it with a customary cut, a custom cut suit, so they cut a piece of me off, the garment, they cut the garment off of me at the port of entry, they call it the afterbirth.
Mm-hmm.
Did they not shorten my life by at least the time in the womb or all of the time out of the womb, depending on perspective?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes. And then I sell myself short. I sell myself short because I don't know where I truly begin. I don't know my godly origin. But it says a material alteration. The clamping and cutting of the umbilical cord is a material alteration. It is also a genetic modification because what they're doing is your 46 chromosome supreme being from fertilization to last breath exists, but the birth certificated 92 chromosome monstrosity is a genetic alteration, meaning that they've added an embellishment or they've added a piece of mom to your 46, which becomes, I call it Leviathan. It's a sea monster. And that's an alteration. That's a genetic modification. That's GMO man, a genetically modified man. And of course, if you use, and the birth certificate is a machine part, or it's a device that they use as a machine part. So by using the certificate, you're part man, part machine. What is that? What do they call that? Transhumanist. You're a transhuman using the birth certificate.
Yeah.
Waste. Let me see what waste is. Any unlawful act or omission of duty on the part of the tenant which results in permanent injury to the inheritance. Listen, when I look at the back of the book, and I look at the implantation at the top, the biological implantation, and I see my boat down below, beached, stranded on a beach, which is what the fetal maternal placenta evidence is. When I look at that, my boat looks like it's a tenant on a motherland or on Mother's Island. It looks like I am still a tenant to that island. If my biology is left behind on Mom's accretion, it looks like I'm a tenant on her land, on her island. My boat on her island. It requires some flip, some rental. But what if I'm still using it 64 years later? Did I leave anything behind? The answer is no.
No.
So I can't be a tenant. I cannot be a tenant on Mom's island because I'm still using it today. I didn't abandon it. My biology has not become a derelict vessel. Hell, it's been private the whole time. It's always been private. To use as I wish or as I will. But it looks like I'm a tenant. The fetal-maternal placenta looks like baby is still recorded or connected to mom. The infant is still attached to mother.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a tenant for life. A birthday makes you a tenant for life. I just have a right-of-way over that land, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to see what else. Oh, look at this. Page 1426, waste. The early English doctrine was to the effect that anything which changed the character or nature of the land, notwithstanding the fact that it was an improvement thereto, constituted waste. Change the character or nature of the land. Remember, the land is under my boat.
Mm-hmm.
The fetal-maternal placenta looks like an island with a boat on it. But that's in their story. That's in their narrative. In nature, I just stop there. Evolutionary due process says I'm not there today. I haven't been there for 64 years. You know what I'm getting at? And I'm still using the biology, so what they have on deposit, or presumably on deposit, has never been abandoned. I've not abandoned any piece of my life. I've not forgotten about it. I am all present and accounted for from fertilization to this moment. So there's no waste. I'm not changing the character of anything. I'm leaving everything the way it is. Listen, you guys want to think it's the holy ground? Great. It's still my equity. It's still my equity. Right underneath that, what I just read, it says the primary distinction between waste and trespass is that in waste, the injury is done by one rightfully in possession. The primary distinction between waste and trespass is that in waste, the injury is done by one rightfully in possession. Who do you suppose is rightfully in possession?
I am.
Of the maternal accretion.
Oh. Well, I still.
That's a hard question to answer.
Yeah, if I'm first in time and it was created solely for my journey, then I'm the one that has rightful possession of it.
But when would you require that?
Only in the womb.
Only in the womb. And again, if you're forced to claim it as the person in suit of the sovereign, which evidences what? Wherever the sovereign may sojourn with his regal retinue, if that's the court, if that's the only way you can get back to first and second estate, first, second, and third estate wholeness,
mm-hmm.
That's the problem to me, is that they're saying that the primary distinction between waste and trespass is that in waste, the injury is done by one rightfully in possession. The only time that maternal accretion is even being used is infancy.
Mm-hmm.
And the only one that has a right to be there at that moment would be embryo, fetus, baby. Nobody else has a right to be there. I mean, in nature. I'm saying in nature, in natural law, in nature, the only one that has a right of way or a right to be there is you. But 70 years later, you don't require that infant implantation. You don't, because if you do claim it now, what happens? What do they call that? What, you're going to be suffering infancy again. What is that?
I mean, undue influence.
Undue influence. So, again, what I'm trying to get to is that in 1871, they call it a civil war. And, of course, the Civil War is the war between the North and South. I call it between capital and labor, or between government and body. It's a war that splits your mind and your body, which means your ability to self-govern, it comes into question. It means that your dog is off the leash. It means that your biology, your pagan, is running wild out there because your Christian doesn't have it under control. The cutting of the umbilical cord gives them the ability to say there's a right and a left, or there's a right and a wrong, when in reality it's just nature. And the only one that gets to determine your life is you. You're the author of your life. But the problem is you have to know where that life begins, and that's fertilization. When I see 1871 and I see what the Civil War did, it brought in a Gregorian calendar, biometric cut that is subjected to international law. By the way, that cut is known as just cogens, J-U-S space T-O-G-E-N-S, just cogens. And that's the measure that they use to keep the peace between Rome and everywhere else in the world. But that's your equity. The only way you can retain equity is to stand your ground from fertilization to last breath, because you can't claim anything without suffering the consequences of that claim. Nature, aligning with nature, means you don't have to make any claims at all, because it's just evolutionary due process from the beginning to the end. You're not claiming anything. Truth doesn't require a claim. Does it? Three things. Then you have the Organic Act of the District of Columbia, which allows a place for the fallen man, fallen angel to be located. Of course, then where you fell within the District of Columbia allows that jurisdiction to come into play. Now the Bar Association, who can only work within the District of Columbia, the Bar Association, which can only work within the District of Columbia, now is doing what? It's working with the fallen angel, the fallen man, to bring him back to God, or to reconnect him with God. And it's all based upon a phantom limb that has been a piece of you, an organ that has been cut off and sacrificed ultimately, that then looks like what? It looks like the Fifth Amendment, life and limb, and it also looks like the Jesus dying on the cross and paying the debt, which is kind of what the indenture is. Remember that Jesus on the cross is your boat that got you here. Jesus walks on water. Your extra embryonic material walked in the waters of mother, on the waters of mother. That's the sacrifice. That's the piece that was sacrificed to get you here. Your own boat got you here. Your own biology got you here. But then you cut yourself off from that material because you didn't require it. Once you got to the dry land, air-based realm outside the womb, you didn't need that infant boat anymore. But what they're doing is they're reattaching that infant boat to you so that you lose capacity. And, of course, that's called undue influence. But my point is that 1871, the Civil War introduced a time frame, and that time frame is a jurisdiction. It's a Christian calendar subjecting Christians to a frame of reference, to a realm. And Rome has always been pagan. They just swallowed up Christianity in 325 or whatever it was. Anyway, I talked too much today. I don't want to have to go move furniture now, but I do. Heck.
I have to go get packed from my journey.
Go get packed. Call me later. Let me know before you leave, though. I'd like to talk before you leave.
Okay.
I know that's
all right.
That's this week.
Yeah. Well, we're leaving tomorrow. But
Then call me on the road or something.
Yeah, I will.
All right. Love you, lady. Talk to you.
Yeah. Talk to you. Bye.